She's not breathing? Boy screams at biker. 312, Hell's Angels. Block highway in minutes. She's not breathing, the boy screamed, sprinting into the gas station lane like he'd been fired out of the dark. His voice sliced through the rumble of idling Harleys. Heads turned, phones lifted. Nobody moved fast enough, except the biker he was yelling at. Before we continue, tell us in the comments where you are watching this from. The biker's name was Kane. Leather vest, grease on his hands, a red and white winged skull patch on his back. He'd been tightening a strap on his saddlebag when the kid latched onto his arm. "Please," the boy choked. "She just fell. She's not breathing." Kane didn't ask who she was. He just followed at a hard jog, boots slapping concrete, helmet tucked under his elbow. 10 steps away, a woman lay near the curb, cheek on oil-stained pavement. Her purse was open. A grocery receipt fluttered under her fingers. Her eyes were half-lidded and wrong, and her lips had gone gray. The boy, Noah, Kane heard someone call him, dropped to his knees and shook her shoulder. Mom, wake up, please." Kane knelt beside her. "Noah, look at me." His voice was low and absolute. "Step back, now." Noah scooted away, shaking. Kane tilted the woman's chin, watched her chest. Nothing. 2 fingers to her neck, 1 beat, 2. "Call 911, somebody shouted, like the words could restart her heart. A man in a work truck fumbled his phone. No signal? Kane had already pulled a small trauma kit from his saddlebag. Gloves, airway check, hands stacked over the center of her chest. 1, 2, 3. Compressions. Hard, steady. The woman's body rocked against the ground. Noah made a thin, desperate sound. "You're hurting her." "If I don't, she's gone," Kane said and kept counting. 2 rescue breaths, back to compressions. The first siren wailed somewhere distant, then faded behind the highway noise and the crowd's murmurs. Noah suddenly pointed past the pumps, his finger trembling. "That guy," he whispered. "Black hoodie. He was with her. He was talking to her, and then she fell." Kane's eyes flicked to the convenience store door. A man stood there with his hood up, watching too calmly. Not filming, not calling for help. Just watching. When Kane's gaze locked on him, the man turned away like he'd been caught. Kane's stomach tightened. He stayed on the woman's chest, but his voice sharpened. "Noah, don't look anywhere else. Keep your eyes on her, you hear me?" Noah nodded, jaw clenched to keep from crying. The ambulance finally swung in, brakes squealing. 2 EMTs jumped out with a gurney and froze as they saw the intersection beyond the lot. The on-ramp to Highway 41 was a solid wall of brake lights, semis, minivans, a bus stuck sideways, nobody moving. The driver leaned out of the cab and swore. The nearest EMT dropped beside Kane. "What happened?" "Collapsed. No pulse when I got here," Kane said. "I'm still working." The EMT checked the woman's neck, then her pupils. "We need to move, now." "We can't get out," the driver shouted. "Jackknife on the ramp. Dispatch says 40 minutes minimum." Noah's face went blank. 40? Kane didn't slow. "We don't have 40. The EMT's gaze darted to the line of bikes along the curb. "You got people." Kane didn't answer with words. He pulled a phone from his vest, thick, old, built for dead zones, and hit 1 button. "Angel," a voice answered instantly. Kane kept compressions going with 1 arm while the phone rode his shoulder. "It's Kane. Red Mesa Station off 41. Woman down, kid with her. Ramps locked. We need a corridor." A single breath on the other end. Then, "Location confirmed. Stay on her. Keep the kid close." Kane hung up. The EMT stared. "Who was that?" Kane nodded at the ambulance. "Noah, get in. Sit. Don't move." Noah stared at his mother, then at Kane's hands trying to beat life back into her. "I can't leave her." "You're not leaving her," Kane said. "You're protecting her." Noah scrambled into the ambulance and curled on the bench, fists jammed against his eyes. For a moment there was only Kane's counting and the ambulance siren idling. Then the sound changed. A low thunder rolled in, deep and multiplying. Not 1 engine, not 10, hundreds. From the far end of the frontage road, bikes poured out of the heat haze in a black river, 2 by 2, then 4 abreast, swallowing the shoulder in the dirt. Chrome flashed, headlights winked, patches caught the sun, red and white-winged skulls, until Kane realized it wasn't a handful of riders. It was a flood. Someone later counted 100, 2, 3. 312 bikes rolling in like a storm. The first wave swept into the lot and braked in unison, forming a wall between the station and the road. More riders streamed past them, straight for the on-ramp. Noah pressed his face to the ambulance window, mouth open. The EMT whispered, "That's Hell's Angels." Kane kept working. Sweat ran into his eye. He didn't wipe it. A heavy rider stepped into Kane's line of sight, iron gray beard, vest worn to the stitching. On his chest, a strip that made even the EMT go quiet. President. The president crouched, eyes cutting to the woman, then to the boy in the ambulance, then to the jammed ramp. "Who did this?" he asked, voice calm like a threat. "Kid says a man in a black hoodie was with her," Kane said, not missing a count. "He bolted when the ambulance showed." The president's gaze snapped toward the store, then scanned the lot edges like he was counting exits. On the ramp, the riders did something no driver understood at first. They didn't fight the jam. They stopped it. Bikes fanned across lanes, forcing cars to idle, sealing shoulders, holding every exit. In less than a minute, a clean corridor opened down the center line like somebody had pulled the road apart. The ambulance driver's eyes went wide. "They're making us a lane." Kane felt it, faint, fluttering under his fingers. "Pulse!" the EMT snapped. "I've got a pulse!" Noah sobbed, loud and relieved. The EMT ripped open an AED case and slapped pads onto the woman's chest. The machine chirped, cold and clinical against the engine roar. "Analyzing," it announced. "No shock advised," the EMT said, already fitting a mask. He squeezed air into her lungs while Kane kept driving his palms down, counting like it was the only thing holding the world together. Behind them, the riders moved with purpose. A tight ring formed around the scene, pushing the crowd back with nothing but presence. Others spread to the lot edges, scanning every car, every shadow, every doorway. A man in a pickup leaned on his horn and tried to creep forward. One rider rolled in front of him, palms out. The pickup stopped. On the ramp, the bikes didn't fight traffic, they disciplined it. Riders parked at angles, sealing lanes, forcing engines to idle. In less than a minute, a straight corridor opened down the center line. The ambulance driver stared. "They're making us a lane." The president crouched close to Kane, eyes cutting to the boy through the ambulance glass. "I want that kid watched," he said, "and I want the hoodie found." A bike hit the lot fast, brakes barking. The rider jumped off with a medical bag, older, calm, hands steady. Same patch, different energy. "Doc," the president said, and the rider was already on his knees. He checked airway, checked pupils, then looked at Kane like he'd read the whole situation in one glance. "Narcan," Doc said, "now." Kane grabbed air, then barked, "Stay with me," and kept working. The president stood and lifted one hand. Riders in the lot went still. He pointed at the ramp. "Lock it," he said. "Nobody moves until our medic is through." A rider sprinted to the ambulance and yanked open the driver door. "On my signal," he told the driver, "you follow my back tire." "You don't stop for anyone." Doc peeled the Narcan open. "If this wakes her up, you might see a fight," he warned the EMT. "Be ready." Kane steadied the woman's head. Doc sprayed it, then pressed 2 fingers to her neck again. Nothing. 1 second. 2. The woman's throat twitched, her lips parted. A rough breath clawed out, like she was dragged up from deep water. Noah let out a strangled sob inside the ambulance. "Mom!" "Don't sit her up," the EMT snapped. He cranked the oxygen, watched the monitor, then pointed at Kane. "Hands off. We've got rhythm, but it's thin." Kane's palms hovered, shaking from the burn. He backed off just enough to let the professionals move, but he didn't step away. Not from her. Not from Noah. The president's eyes kept sweeping the lot. A rider on the edge of the circle raised 2 fingers, signal. Another rider shook his head, negative. The hoodie wasn't where he'd been. Then Noah screamed again, high and panicked, slamming both hands on the ambulance window. "Kane, behind you!" Kane turned his head and saw the black hoodie slipping between parked cars, coming fast, metal flashing in his hand as he cut straight for the ambulance door. Kane didn't think. He moved. The hooded man was already at the ambulance door, one hand on the latch, the other hand low at his thigh, with something metallic catching the light. Thin, narrow, not a gun, a blade, or a syringe. Either way, it was close work. Kane lunged. His shoulder slammed into the man's ribs and drove him sideways into the ambulance panel with a hollow clang. The hooded man bounced off, twisted fast, and tried to slip past Kane's arm like oil. Kane caught a fistful of hoodie and yanked. The man came back with an elbow that clipped Kane's jaw hard enough to spark his vision. Kane staggered half a step, recovered, and swung with the side of his forearm. Controlled, brutal. It landed across the hooded man's throat and pinned him to the ambulance. "Not here," Kane growled, teeth tight. The hooded man's eyes were the only thing visible under the hood, flat and empty, not panicked like someone making a mistake. He was doing a job. He drove his knee up into Kane's thigh. Kane hissed and shifted his weight. The man's hand flashed again toward the door seam. The metal in his fist was clearer now, a small hypodermic syringe. Noah's scream turned into a rasping sob inside the ambulance. He was pounding the glass with both hands, face streaked with tears, eyes wide with terror. Kane snapped his head toward the president. "He's got a needle." The president didn't shout. He didn't have to. Two riders moved like they'd been waiting for that exact word. One came in from the hooded man's blind side and hooked an arm around his neck, locking him in place. The other grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and the syringe skittered out, gone under a parked bike before anyone could stop it. The hooded man didn't fight like a desperate guy. He fought like a trained one. He arched, drove back, tried to split them with leverage. He almost did. Kane stepped in and hammered a short punch into the man's solar plexus. Not a brawl punch, a stop button. The hooded man folded, breath ripping out of him. For the first time, his eyes showed something. Rage, sharp and clean. Then he spat, quick, like he'd been holding something in his cheek. A spray hit Kane's glove. Kane jerked his hand back, instinct screaming. The EMT's voice cut through the noise. "Don't touch your face! Don't touch anything!" He shoved Kane's wrist down and wiped the glove with a sterile pad like it was acid. "We don't know what that is." The hooded man used the distraction. He went limp for half a second, then dropped his weight and tore free. The rider behind him stumbled, off balance, and the hooded man slipped under an outstretched arm and sprinted straight toward the convenience store side alley. "Cut him off!" the president barked. 3 bikes lit up at once, engines snapping. 2 riders peeled off around the building. One went wide toward the dumpsters. Kane chased on foot for 3 steps, then stopped, because the woman was coughing on the gurney, and Doc was already climbing into the back of the ambulance. "Pulse is there," Doc said, voice tight. "But it's ugly. We move now or we lose her." The ambulance driver looked at the corridor on the ramp, then back at the sea of stalled cars beyond it. "You sure you can hold that lane?" The president leaned into the driver window. "You follow my guy. He rides front. You keep your wheels on his line. You don't deviate for anybody." The driver swallowed. "What about the cops?" The president's face didn't change. "They'll understand when they see her." Noah was half standing on the bench, gripping a strap, trying to look through every window at once. "He was right there," he kept saying, like the words could rewind time. He was right there. He was going to. Kane stepped onto the ambulance's rear step and met Noah's eyes through the open door. "Noah," he said, calm like a lid over boiling water. "Listen to me. Stay with your mom. Don't open this door for anyone but Doc. You hear me?" Noah nodded hard, throat working. Kane didn't like leaving the boy. He didn't like leaving the woman. But he could feel the shape of what this was. That hooded man wasn't some random threat on a hot afternoon. He'd moved with purpose, with timing, like he'd known the ambulance would be there, like he'd been waiting for the moment they tried to leave. The president's voice snapped him back. "Kane, front line, now!" Kane ran to his bike, kicked it alive, and slid his helmet on in one motion. Around him, the lot was controlled chaos. 312 bikes staged like a living barricade. Riders were spaced at angles, shoulders squared, faces turned toward the ramp like sentries. A few had dismounted and were on foot, checking the alleyways, the store interior, the trash line. A rider near the store door made a chopping gesture. Gone. The hooded man had vanished. The ambulance doors slammed, the siren switched on, and the whole world seemed to tense. The president lifted one hand. On the ramp, engines rose, bikes moved. They didn't make room. They forced order onto disorder. Riders rolled into the stalled lanes and stopped traffic with their bodies, using bikes as shields and signals. A line of cars tried to creep forward, horns blaring, windows down with shouting, but the riders held the lane with flat palms and hard stares until the drivers went quiet. Kane took his position 30 yards ahead of the ambulance, front tire on the center line of the corridor. Another rider pulled beside him, then one behind, then two out wide like wings. The president rode up next to Kane and pointed once. "Lead, I'm rear. Keep eyes. If he shows, you don't chase. You hold the box, understood?" Kane nodded. Understood. He hated it, but he understood. This wasn't about pride or muscle. This was about a woman breathing on borrowed time. The escort rolled. They came off the gas station lot and onto the ramp like a wedge. Bikes first, ambulance in the middle, more bikes fanning out behind it. The corridor opened in front of them, a clean strip of asphalt carved through a jam of steel and impatience. Faces pressed to windows. Phones were out everywhere. People leaned out of cars, shouting questions nobody answered. A man in a sedan threw his door open, furious, stepping into the lane like he could argue with momentum. Kane braked hard, front wheel inches from the man's knee. "Back in the car," Kane shouted, the words slicing through the siren. "What the hell is this?" the man yelled back. "You can't—" The rider on Kane's right lifted his vest just enough to show the patch, then pointed two fingers at the sedan like a command. The man looked from the patch to the oncoming ambulance, saw Noah's face in the window, white and shaking. And something changed. He stepped back. He closed his door. Kane surged forward again. They pushed up the ramp, past a bus stuck sideways, hazard lights flashing, past a jackknifed rig, its trailer angled like a wall across two lanes. Drivers stood in the heat, hands on hips, yelling into phones. Every time someone tried to break into the corridor, a bike slid into place, silent and firm. The siren wailed behind Kane like a heartbeat turned into sound. At the crest of the ramp, two patrol cars were angled across the right lane with lights spinning. Officers stood near their doors, hands on belts, watching the wall of bikers approach like an incoming tide. Kane's grip tightened. This was where things could go sideways. This was where ego and authority could collide. The president rolled forward, slow and steady, stopping 10 feet from the first patrol car. He didn't rev. He didn't posture. He just pointed over his shoulder at the ambulance threading up behind him, Doc visible through the back window, hands working over the woman's chest. One officer took a step forward. His mouth moved, but the siren swallowed his words. The president leaned slightly, just enough for the officer to hear him over the engines. "She's dying," he said. "Move your car." The officer hesitated. His eyes flicked to the ambulance, then to the corridor, then to the riders holding traffic like a dam. A second officer lifted a radio. "Dispatch, we've got—" Jesus. He looked like he didn't know which code applied to 300 motorcycles and one dying woman. The first officer made a decision. He jogged to his patrol car, slid in, and backed it out of the lane. The second did the same. The corridor stayed open. The escort poured through. Kane didn't exhale until they were past the patrol cars and fully on the highway. Then the air changed. On the open road, everything accelerated. The jam was still there, miles of cars parked under the sun. But the corridor was moving now, a narrow artery of motion through a dead body. Kane kept his speed controlled, not fast enough to be reckless, not slow enough to lose the line. He watched mirrors, watched shoulders, watched gaps where someone might lunge into the lane. He thought about the hooded man's eyes, not panic, not surprise, anger that he'd been interrupted. A rider's voice crackled in Kane's earpiece. Movement on the right shoulder, dark clothing, possible visual. Kane's head snapped right. A figure was running along the gravel shoulder, weaving between stopped cars. Hood up, head down, fast. "Right shoulder," Kane barked. Two riders peeled off instantly, angling toward the shoulder to cut the figure off without leaving the corridor open. Kane kept the line because the ambulance was everything. The figure vaulted a guardrail gap and disappeared into the scrub beyond the highway. One rider chased half a second, then stopped. He didn't pursue into open ground, not without the box tightening around the ambulance. He returned to position like a disciplined soldier. The president's voice came through, cold. "He's trying to stay near us." Kane's stomach sank. "He's tracking the ambulance." "Or the kid," the president said. Kane looked back at the ambulance window. Noah's face was still there, pressed to the glass, eyes scanning the world like he expected it to jump him. Doc's silhouette moved in frantic bursts. Oxygen, bag, monitor. The woman's head rolled slightly with each bump. She was alive, but barely. The corridor tightened as they approached the next choke point, an interchange where lanes merged, traffic bunched, and tempers rose. A pickup in the left lane jerked forward, trying to nose into the corridor. Kane shifted left, blocking it clean. The pickup's driver leaned out, screaming something obscene. Kane didn't scream back. He just stared him down and held his line until the pickup backed off. The siren never stopped. A few cars ahead, someone had gotten out and started filming from the median, walking dangerously close to the corridor. A rider swung out, guiding them back with a hand like a shepherd with a stick, not touching them, not escalating, just pushing them away from the moving ambulance. And still, in the back of Kane's mind, the hooded man's needle glinted. Why a needle? Why not a knife? Oh no, why not a gun? Because a needle is quiet. A needle can look like an accident. A needle can finish someone who's already weak without drawing attention. Kane's earpiece crackled again. Hospital in sight. 2 minutes. The skyline ahead was low and ugly, heat shimmering over concrete. The county hospital sat like a brick block on the horizon. As they got closer, Kane saw flashing lights. More patrol cars, more responders, people gathering near the entrance drawn by sirens like moths. But something else caught his eye. Near the ambulance bay, just outside the emergency entrance, stood a man in scrubs. Still, waiting. Not moving like someone reacting to an arriving emergency. Watching the corridor, watching the bikes, watching the ambulance like he already knew it was coming. Kane's throat went dry. He keyed the mic. President, ER entrance, man in scrubs, left side, not reacting. The president didn't answer right away. Then, I see him. Kane rolled forward, the hospital swelling in front of him. Riders tightened formation, spacing closer, bodies angled to shield the ambulance as it turned into the emergency drive. The crowd at the entrance surged, phones up, faces curious, some angry, some afraid. And the man in scrubs took one slow step backward, toward the door, like he was making room for them, or like he was clearing the path for someone behind him. Kane's eyes flicked to the glass doors. They slid open. And for a split second, Kane saw a flash of black fabric inside the hospital lobby, hood up, moving fast toward a side hallway. "He's here!" Kane shouted, as the ambulance brakes screamed and the doors burst open and Noah stumbled out, reaching for his mother while Doc yelled for a gurney, and the man in scrubs lifted his hand like he was about to point Noah in the wrong direction, and Kane surged forward. Kane hit the emergency drive at a run, boots slipping on hot concrete, eyes locked on the glass doors where he'd seen that flash of black fabric. The ambulance bay exploded into motion. A nurse slammed open the side entrance and yelled for a gurney. 2 orderlies burst out, pushing one so fast its wheels rattled. The EMTs rolled Noah's mother down the ramp, oxygen hissing, Doc already talking in clipped phrases that sounded like numbers and warnings. Noah tried to follow, small hands reaching for the gurney rail like he could physically keep her alive. "Mom!" An ER tech blocked him without thinking. "You can't." Noah froze, panicked, about to bolt right into the path of rolling wheels. Kane caught him by the back of his shirt and pulled him out of the lane just as the gurney shot past. "Stay on my side," Kane said. "Breathe." Noah's eyes stayed pinned to his mother disappearing through the doors. "They're taking her. They're helping her," Kane said, and he meant it, even though every nerve in his body was screaming that the hospital was the worst place to be if someone wanted her quiet. Behind them, bikes kept arriving in a controlled wave. Riders fanned out across the entry road, not blocking ambulances, not choking the bay, just sealing the perimeter so nobody walked in behind the gurney without being seen. The president rolled in slow and stopped dead center of the drive like he owned the concrete. He took his helmet off, didn't even look at the crowd filming from the sidewalk. His eyes went to the man in scrubs. The man had that fake calm Kane hated. He held himself like staff, but he wasn't moving like staff. Not stepping in to help, not calling out vitals, not reacting to the urgency. He was watching Noah. The man lifted his hand and pointed toward a hallway that wasn't the trauma entrance. "Family intake is..." Kane stepped between Noah and the pointing finger. "Don't move him," Kane snapped, sharp enough that the man's expression twitched. The president walked up behind Kane, voice flat. "You work here?" The man forced a smile. "Of course, I'm trying to help. The ER. A real nurse burst through the doors and shouted, "Trauma 1, now, move!" She didn't look at the man in scrubs once. The man's smile tightened. Kane saw it, microsecond of irritation. Then the man shifted his body just enough to block Noah's line of sight, like he was positioning. Kane's hand went to Noah's shoulder and steered him back. "Eyes on me," Noah swallowed. That's not the guy from the station," but Kane didn't let him finish. "President?" The president didn't ask. He just nodded at two riders. "Watch the kid, watch the doors." The two men moved in, standing loose but ready, one on each side of Noah like human guardrails. Kane's attention snapped back to the glass doors. They slid open again, and a rush of cold air hit him. Inside, fluorescent light and polished tile and a dozen directions to disappear. He caught it a second time, black hood, cutting left, hugging the wall, moving like he already knew the building. Kane surged forward. A security guard stepped into his path, palm out. "You can't." Kane didn't shove him. He didn't need the kind of scene that gave the attacker cover. He leaned in close, voice low, eyes hard. "A woman came in not breathing," Kane said. "Someone tried to inject her in the lot. That person just went through those doors." The guard's eyes widened. "What?" The president appeared beside Kane like a shadow, badgeless but carrying weight anyway. "Lock the exits," he said to the guard like it was already agreed. "Now?" The guard hesitated. One look at the line of bikes outside, one look at the gurney trail inside. Then he grabbed his radio. "Code," he started, then swallowed. "Possible threat. Lockdown, call PD." Kane moved. Inside the ER lobby, everything had layers. Waiting room chairs full of tired faces. A TV blaring daytime noise nobody listened to. A receptionist behind glass looking up like she'd just heard a storm hit the building. A man in a hoodie didn't belong here. But there were 100 places to hide a man for 10 seconds. Kane cut toward the left corridor where he'd seen the black flash. He kept his hands visible, didn't want a cop seeing patched bikers sprinting inside and deciding the wrong story. He passed a set of double doors marked "Staff Only." They were swinging from recent movement. He went through. The air changed. Less noise, more chemical bite. The sound of shoes on tile echoed. Ahead, a stairwell door snapped shut. Kane hit it with his shoulder and it opened into a concrete box that smelled like disinfectant and heat. Footsteps above. Kane took the stairs 2 at a time. Halfway up, the hooded man appeared at the landing, turning back just long enough for Kane to see his face. Not much. Sharp cheekbones, a bruised dark shadow under one eye, the kind of expression that never softened. His gaze didn't say, "Get away." It said, "You're late." He swung. A fist came down with something in it, metal again. Kane threw his forearm up and felt a sting like a wasp bite through leather. Not deep, not a stab, a puncture. Kane's blood went cold. He grabbed the man's wrist and drove him into the cinder block wall. The hooded man bounced, twisted, and tried to rake the metal point across Kane's forearm again. Kane slammed his elbow down hard, forcing the hand open. A small injector clattered to the steps. Kane kicked it away and kept driving forward, pinning the hooded man by the throat with his forearm, pressing until the man's breathing turned ragged. "Who sent you?" Kane hissed. The hooded man's mouth curled like he almost laughed. He didn't answer. Instead, his free hand flashed up and threw a handful of something into Kane's eyes. Powder. Kane jerked back, blinking hard, vision blurring, tears flooding instantly. The hooded man slipped out of the choke like he'd greased his own shoulders and darted down, not up, past Kane, toward the lower floors. Kane wiped his eyes with the back of his wrist and immediately regretted it. It burned. He heard a door slam below, then the thud of fast feet. Kane barreled down after him, lungs pulling hot air, eyes watering, vision sharpening in broken pulses. At the bottom landing, the hooded man shoved through another door marked "Service Access." Kane hit it a heartbeat later and found a narrow corridor lined with pipes, electrical panels, and a low hum that made the air feel alive. No hooded man, just a split of shadows where he'd gone. Kane's eyes swept the floor. Something lay near the wall, dropped in haste. A plastic badge on a lanyard, face down, and a phone, screen lit, vibrating with an incoming call that displayed no name, just a number. Kane snatched both. The badge flipped in his hand. Not security, not nurse. Hospital administration. The photo wasn't the hooded man. It was the man in scrubs from outside. Kane's stomach tightened like a fist. He pocketed the badge and the phone and turned back toward the ER, fast, but now he wasn't chasing a ghost. Now he was in a building where the enemy could wear a clean uniform and smile. When he burst back into the staff corridor, a nurse nearly collided with him, eyes wide. "You can't be back here." Kane held up the badge like a flash of proof. "That man outside," he said. "Scrubs, he's not helping. He's connected." The nurse stared at the badge photo and her face drained. That's admin." "Where's Trauma 1? Kane demanded. She pointed, hand shaking. He ran. Trauma 1 was a storm of motion. Noah's mother lay on a bed surrounded by hands and machines, her chest rising in shallow assisted pulls. Someone was cutting away her shirt, slapping leads, calling out vitals. A doctor's voice cut through it all, calm, fast, practiced. Kane stayed at the threshold. He didn't barge in. Doc stood inside, gloves on, eyes sharp. He looked at Kane once and read his face. "Poison," Kane mouthed. Doc's jaw tightened. He nodded slightly. "Not sure what," he said under his breath. "But it's not a simple collapse." Kane held up the phone he'd grabbed. "He dropped this," he said, "and this badge is admin, Scrubs guy." He tried to point the kid away. Doc's eyes flicked to the badge, then back to Kane. "Where's Noah?" Kane spun and saw the two riders who'd been watching Noah at the entrance pushing into the corridor, faces set. Noah was between them, and Noah's eyes were locked on someone down the hall, someone in scrubs. Standing near the reception glass, half turned, one hand low like he was holding something just out of view, Noah whispered, voice breaking, "That's him. That's the one who was with Mom at the station." Kane's blood turned to ice. Not the hooded man. The clean one. The one who'd been waiting. The one who belonged here. Kane started toward him, and the man in scrubs saw Kane's movement, made a decision, and stepped back through a door that read, "Authorized personnel only." Kane lunged. The door shut. A lock clicked. Kane hit it with his shoulder anyway, hard enough to rattle the frame. Inside the room beyond, something heavy scraped across the floor. A barricade. Kane pressed his forehead to the door for half a second, listening. No footsteps, no panic. Just the hum of fluorescent lights, and then a soft sound, like a drawer opening, like someone calmly reaching for a tool. Kane stepped back from the door and raised his fist to hit it again. Kane hit the door again, harder. The frame shuddered. The lock held. Whatever was wedged on the other side scraped a little, then settled like the room was bracing itself. Behind him, the ER corridor was suddenly louder, radios crackling, nurses calling, security shoes slapping tile. The hospital was waking up to the fact that an ambulance had arrived with 300 motorcycles outside. The president stepped in close, voice low. "You got that badge?" Khan pulled the admin lanyard from his pocket. The plastic card felt warm from his body heat, like it had already been sitting in someone else's hand too long. He swiped it on the reader beside the door. A green light blinked. The lock clicked. Kane pushed. Nothing. The barricade inside held it shut. "Okay," the president said, almost calm. He glanced down the hall. Two riders stood with Noah near the reception glass, bodies angled so nobody could approach him without being seen. Noah's eyes were locked on Kane, desperate and pleading at the same time. The president looked back at the door. Quiet breach. One rider was already moving, slipping away toward the ambulance bay. He came back fast with a hospital gurney, empty, and positioned it like a battering ram. Kane took the front handle. Another rider grabbed the side rail. The president raised two fingers. They drove the gurney forward. Metal slammed into the door with a deep, flat boom. The barricade inside scraped and shifted. Not enough. Again. Boom. A nurse shrieked somewhere behind them. "Stop! You can't!" Boom. The door flexed. The barricade inside gave a sharp crack of sound like wood splintering. Kane shoved as the gurney hit, and the gap opened an inch, then two. A glimpse through the crack. A rolling cart shoved sideways, a chair tipped, a cabinet door hanging open. Not a panic room. A supply office. Kane leaned his shoulder into the gap and forced it wider. The cart inside slid, wheels squealing, and the door swung just enough to slip through. Kane went first. Cold air, fluorescent light, the smell of sanitizer and paper. Cabinets lining the walls, boxes stacked too neatly, a desk with a monitor still on, cursor blinking on a form like someone had been mid-sentence when they got interrupted. No Scrubs man. But there was movement. The far door, service access, was closing. Kane sprinted and caught it with his hand before it latched. He yanked it open, and a metal shelving unit slammed into it from the other side, almost crushing his fingers. He jerked back just in time. The Scrubs man's face appeared for a split second through the narrow gap, eyes hard now, no friendliness left. He shoved again, trying to pin Kane's arm in the door. Kane drove his boot into the shelving unit, kicking it back enough to free the door, and forced it open. And the Scrubs man was already running. He wasn't sprinting blindly. He was moving like he'd memorized every corridor, every turn that cameras didn't cover. He cut left, then right, ducked through another staff-only door, and vanished behind swinging panels. Kane chased. Behind them, the president didn't follow into the maze. He held the corridor. He held Noah. He held control. Kane pushed through the staff door into a tighter hallway where the hum of machines was louder. Pipes ran overhead. A maintenance sign hung crooked on the wall. The Scrubs man's shoes slapped tile ahead, then stopped. Kane rounded the corner and almost walked into a man in a lab coat. Not the Scrubs man. A different staffer, older, startled, holding a clipboard like a shield. He blinked at Kane's vest, at Kane's face, then at the hallway behind Kane. "What's going on?" the man demanded. "Security said—" Kane didn't slow. "Where'd he go?" The man's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes flicked almost involuntarily toward a doorway marked laundry/linens. Kane was already there. He shoved it open. A burst of heat hit him. Industrial dryers, carts of folded sheets, the smell of bleach. A woman in scrubs looked up from a bin, alarmed. And in the far corner, the Scrubs man was lifting a lid on a large rolling hamper like he was about to climb inside it. He froze when he saw Kane. For the first time, Kane saw real fear in him, not of getting caught, but of losing something he couldn't afford to lose. The Scrubs man's hand went into his pocket. Kane lunged. The Scrubs man flicked his wrist and tossed something small toward the dryer's spinning mouth, like throwing away a cigarette. Kane caught the motion and dove. The object hit the floor and skittered. Kane's fingers closed on it just before it slid under the machine, a tiny plastic vial. Clear liquid. No label. Kane snapped his head up. The Scrubs man was running again, pushing past the linen worker hard enough to knock her into a cart. Sheets spilled like white water across the floor. Kane sprang after him, but the corridor beyond had already started to fill with bodies, security, hospital staff, and at the far end, 2 uniformed police officers moving fast with hands already near their weapons. The Scrubs man aimed straight for them. He raised his hands and shouted, loud enough to carry. "That's him! He attacked me! He broke into an office!" The officer's eyes locked onto Kane like a switch flipped. "Stop!" one officer barked. "Hands where I can see them!" Kane's world narrowed. The Scrubs man didn't slow. He kept moving past the officers like he belonged there, like he was the victim leading law enforcement toward the threat. And the officers stepped in front of Kane. Kane held the vial up, palm open. "He's lying. He tried to—" "Hands!" the officer shouted again, voice sharp now, adrenaline rising. "On the wall!" Kane could feel it, the danger of this moment, not the hoodie, not the needle. The story that could get him locked up while Noah's mother was dying, and Noah was left alone with the wrong people. Kane lifted both hands slowly, vial pinched between 2 fingers like evidence. "Look at him," Kane said, controlled. "He ran to you. He's not scared. He's steering you." The Scrubs man turned, face twisted in outrage so convincing it was almost art. "He's threatening my staff. He brought a gang into the hospital." From behind Kane, the president's voice cut down the hallway, low and lethal. "Nobody touches him." The officer snapped his head toward the sound. The president stepped into view, helmet off, eyes steady. Behind him, 2 riders stood with Noah. One of them had an arm loosely across Noah's chest, not restraining him, shielding him. Noah's gaze was wild, darting between Kane and the officers like he didn't know which adult would make the next thing worse. The Scrubs man's eyes flicked to Noah for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Kane saw it. Not concern. Calculation. Kane's voice dropped. "He's after the kid. The scrubs man's mouth tightened and then he moved. He didn't charge Kane. He pivoted away from the officers and bolted straight down the side corridor that led back toward reception, toward Noah. Kane exploded forward. "Move!" Kane shouted at the officers, and this time there was no arguing. He slipped around them as they turned, confused, caught between authority and momentum. The scrubs man was fast, but Kane had already burned through a highway chase on foot today, and his body was running on something deeper than energy. He closed the distance. The scrubs man reached the reception area and didn't even try to grab Noah with his hands. He reached for the reception window microphone and barked, "Code Pink! Child abduction!" like he could weaponize the hospital itself. Alarms didn't go off, but heads snapped around. A security guard near the entrance turned and started moving toward Noah automatically, trained response kicking in without context. The scrubs man pointed at the riders. "They're taking him!" The security guard stepped toward Noah, hand out. "Sir, come with me." Noah flinched, confusion hitting him like a wave. "No, I'm with—" Kane hit the reception area like a crash. "Don't touch him!" Kane shouted, and the whole lobby froze for half a beat, everyone caught between the patch, the uniforms, and the terrified kid. The scrubs man used that half beat. He dipped behind the reception counter, grabbed a wristband printer, and ripped a fresh band free. He slapped it onto Noah's wrist with a practice snap, talking fast and soothing like he was calming a child. "There you go, buddy," he said, smiling. "We're just going to take you to a quiet room. You're safe." Noah stared down at the band like it was a shackle. I don't know you." The scrubs man kept smiling. "It's okay. You're in shock." One of the riders stepped forward, blocking the scrubs man's path. "Back off," he said, calm, not loud. The scrubs man's smile faltered. He lifted his hands again, performing innocence for the cameras and the crowd. "I'm trying to protect a child from criminals." The president didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Kid stays." Security hesitated, and in that hesitation, the scrubs man made his mistake. His hand slid into the pocket of his scrubs, fast and low, aiming for Noah's side like he'd done this before, like he could slip something in and be gone before anyone realized. Kane was already moving. He grabbed the scrubs man's wrist and slammed it up against the reception counter, hard enough to make the man gasp. Something metallic clinked and dropped. A capped syringe bounced on the tile. The security guard's face drained. "What the hell?" Kane didn't let go. He leaned in close, voice cold enough to cut. "Tell me what's in it." The scrubs man's eyes went wide, then hard again. "You can't prove." Doc's voice shouted from down the hall. "Kane!" Kane's head snapped toward Trauma 1. Doc stood in the doorway, gloves streaked, eyes urgent. "She's crashing," Doc said, her rhythms dropping. Whatever hit her is still in her system. Kane's grip tightened. The scrubs man saw the split in Kane's attention and tried to twist free. Kane drove him into the counter again, pinning him. The officer who'd been behind Kane caught up, finally seeing the syringe on the floor, finally seeing the shape of the truth. "Sir," the officer said, voice suddenly unsure. "Step away from—" The scrubs man did something Kane didn't expect. He didn't fight Kane. He looked past him, straight at Noah, and said softly, almost kindly, "It's okay, Noah. Your mom won't feel anything soon." Noah's face went empty. Kane felt heat flood his chest. He shoved the scrubs man back and reached for his own phone to call it in, to lock the building down properly, to do it the right way. The phone in his pocket vibrated, the one he'd picked up in the service corridor. Unknown number again. It rang like it owned the moment. Kane answered without thinking. "Yeah." A voice came through, calm, distorted like it was behind glass. "You're louder than we planned," it said. Kane's eyes locked on the scrubs man. The scrubs man wasn't looking at Kane anymore. He was listening. The voice continued, unhurried. "You have the vial, you have the kid, you have the mother for now." Kane's blood turned to ice as the voice said Noah's name like it had always belonged to them. "Hand over Noah, and this ends." Kane didn't move the phone away from his ear. He didn't look at the cops. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight at the man in scrubs whose wrist was still pinned to the reception counter and watched the tiniest change in his face when the voice on the line said Noah's name. That was the confirmation Kane needed. "You're on speaker," Kane lied, steady. He wasn't. "Say it again." The voice stayed calm, almost bored. "Hand over Noah, and this ends." Kane kept his grip on the scrubs man's wrist. Who are you? A short breath, like a smile behind glass. The person keeping your world from getting louder. Doc's shout cut down the corridor again. Kane! Now! Kane turned his head just enough to see Trauma 1 through the open doorway. Bodies moving, a monitor screaming a faster, uglier rhythm. Doc's hands on the woman's chest again, compressions restarting like the last hour hadn't happened. The EMT yelled, "Pressure's dropping!" Kane's jaw tightened. He looked back at the scrubs man. What did you give her? The scrubs man's lips pressed thin. His eyes flicked to Noah. That's where he really was. Noah stood frozen between two riders, small and shaking, staring at Kane like Kane was the only solid thing in the building. The fresh wristband the scrubs man had snapped on him sat bright against his skin. Kane made a decision. He shoved the scrubs man backward into the side of the reception counter and handed the phone to the president without breaking eye contact with the target. Hold that. The president took it, eyes cold, and put it to his ear. Talk. The voice didn't change. You're not who I called. The president's tone stayed flat. You called a kid's name. That means you're close. That means you're reachable. A beat of silence. Then the voice said, softer, more precise. 2 minutes. Kane bent, snatched the capped syringe off the tile, and lifted it up where the officer and security guard couldn't pretend they hadn't seen it. You see this? Kane said to the security guard, not loud, just hard. Your man dropped it, the guard swallowed. He said you— No, Noah blurted, voice cracking. He was with my mom at the station. He gave her something. He told her it was for the heat. She drank it, and then she— The officer's eyes widened. Kid, slow down. He's lying, the scrubs man snapped, and it came out too sharp, too angry. He jerked his wrist, trying to pull free. Kane tightened his grip and leaned in. Your call, he said, low. You want to play victim? Then you don't mind a needle test. The scrubs man's nostrils flared. You touch me with that, and I'll own you in court. Court comes later, Kane said. Her heart is now. Doc's voice again, louder, urgent enough to turn heads. I need that vial. Kane's hand went to his pocket and he pulled the tiny, unlabeled vial out. Clear liquid, no markings, exactly the kind of thing that could kill quietly. He started toward Trauma 1. The scrubs man saw it and his whole body shifted, like a dog seeing meat. He lunged, not at Kane's face, not at Kane's chest, at the vial. Kane jerked it back just in time. The scrubs man's fingers missed by inches, snatching air. His eyes flashed with naked panic. Got you, Kane murmured. He drove the scrubs man down to his knees with a twist of the wrist, controlled enough not to break it, brutal enough to make him stop fighting. One rider stepped in behind and locked the man's arms back. Kane shoved the vial into Doc's hand as he reached the trauma doorway. Doc didn't thank him. He just snapped, Where'd you get this? Off your admin friend, Kane said. Doc held it up to the light, eyes narrowing. This could be— He stopped himself, shook his head and barked at a nurse. Get Tox, now, and get me activated charcoal and the crash cart meds. Move. A nurse ran. The monitor screamed. Doc jabbed 2 fingers into the woman's neck. Pulse threadbare, he said. If this is what I think, we're in trouble. Kane glanced back to the reception. Noah was still there, and the president was still holding the phone, listening. 2 minutes, the voice repeated, like a metronome. The president's eyes swept the lobby and the glass doors and the side corridors. Where are you? He asked, a low laugh. Close enough to see you thinking. Kane felt the hair on his arms rise under leather. Inside the trauma room, Doc was moving fast. He drew something into a syringe, not the one from the floor, and pushed it into an IV line. The woman's chest hitched, her eyes fluttered. Noah's head snapped toward the doorway. Mom? Not yet, Kane said, and the words came out rough. He stepped back into the lobby and pointed at the 2 riders guarding Noah. Get him out of here. Staff hallways, no elevators, no waiting rooms. Noah panicked instantly. No, I can't leave her. Kane crouched in front of him, close enough that Noah could hear him over the alarms and sirens outside. You leaving her is what they want, Kane said. You stay alive, she gets a chance. Noah's eyes filled. He said she won't— I heard what he said, Kane cut in. He's lying to break you. The president's voice went quiet, deadly, still on the phone. You want the kid? Come take him. The line went dead. For half a second, the hospital felt like it stopped breathing. Then, the security guard's radio crackled with a new voice, sharp and official. "All units, stand by. County Sheriff's Office en route. Control the situation until arrival." Kane's stomach dropped, because control in a hospital meant paperwork, protocols, and people who could be bought. The scrubs man, still on his knees, lifted his head just slightly and smiled like he'd been waiting for that exact radio call. Kane leaned down into his ear. "You called them." The scrubs man's smile widened. "I called people who don't like gangs." Kane straightened and watched the glass doors. Outside, riders were holding the perimeter with quiet discipline, moving people back without touching them, forming a line between the emergency bay and the parking lot. Phones were everywhere. A couple of local news vans had already started creeping in. Then, the sheriff's SUV rolled up fast, lights flashing. Not one, three. They parked hard at angles, doors opening before the engines even died. A deputy stepped out first. Tall, clean, mirrored sunglasses, the kind of posture that said he liked being the loudest person in any room. He walked in like he owned the building. Behind him, two more deputies followed, hands resting near their sidearms. The lead deputy stopped in the lobby, took one look at Kane's vest, and made a face like he'd tasted something bad. "What's going on here?" he demanded. The scrubs man lifted his head and snapped into his performance instantly. "Deputy Mallory, thank God. They attacked me. They forced their way into restricted areas. They're trying to take a child." Noah flinched at the word take. The deputy's eyes slid to Noah, then to Kane. "You," he said, pointing. "Step away from the kid." Kane didn't move. The president stepped forward, slow. "He's not taking the kid anywhere," the president said. Mallory's gaze flicked to the president's patch and hardened. "You bringing your whole crew into my county hospital?" Kane held up the syringe the scrubs man dropped in the empty cap. "He tried to inject the kid," Kane said. "He poisoned the mother. We've got a vial, we've got a witness, and you can pull camera footage right now." Mallory didn't look at the syringe. He looked at the scrubs man, and the scrubs man gave a tiny shake of his head, almost invisible, almost nothing. Mallory's jaw tightened like he'd just received instructions. He turned back to Kane. "Put it down," he ordered. "Hands on the wall." The officer from earlier, the one who'd seen the syringe hit the tile, spoke up uncertainly. "Deputy, I saw—" Mallory cut him off without looking. "I'm in charge." The lobby was a knife edge now. Every person in it could feel it. Security was frozen between badges. Nurses hovered at the edges, eyes wide, afraid to step in. Noah whispered, shaking. "He's lying. He gave her something to drink. He told her—" Mallory stepped toward Noah. "Son, you're coming with me for your safety." One of the riders guarding Noah shifted his feet, blocking without raising his hands. Mallory's hand dropped to his belt. "Move," he warned. Kane felt the room tilt toward violence. He forced his voice to stay calm. "Deputy," Kane said, "she's in Trauma 1 crashing. Doc's trying to reverse whatever they did. You start a fight in this lobby and she dies while you're proving you're the boss." Mallory's lips curled. "Not my problem." That's when Doc came out of Trauma 1, gloves off, eyes blazing, holding the vial up like a grenade. "It is your problem," Doc snapped. "If this is what I think, we've got a deliberate poisoning and an attempted injection. If you pull the wrong person out of here, you're helping the attacker." Mallory finally looked at the vial, and for a fraction of a second, his expression changed. Recognition. Then he covered it instantly with anger. "Give me that," Mallory said, stepping toward Doc. Doc didn't back up. "Not without a chain of custody and tox confirmation. You want to help? Seal the building and get me a lab tech." Mallory's eyes cut to the scrubs man again. The scrubs man's smile was back, small and certain. Mallory pointed at Kane. "Cuff him." One of the deputies moved. Kane shifted his stance, ready. And Noah, trembling, suddenly blurted the one detail he hadn't said yet, like it ripped out of him. "My mom, before she fell, she said, 'Don't let them take my bag.' And when we got to the ambulance, my bag was gone." Kane's head snapped toward the reception desk. The woman's purse, open on the curb, had been brought in with the gurney. Kane had seen it for a second near Trauma 1. Now it wasn't there. Doc's eyes widened. "Where's her personal effects?" A nurse nearby went pale. I, I put them in the property bin like always. Kane was already moving, because if the bag was missing, it wasn't about killing her anymore. It was about what she had. And as Kane turned toward the property hallway, he caught the scrubs man's eyes one more time, cold, satisfied, while Mallory barked orders and the deputies stepped in. And somewhere deeper in the hospital, an alarm started screaming like a door had just been forced open. The alarm didn't sound like a fire drill. It sounded like a door that wasn't supposed to open had just been ripped out of its routine. A high, urgent wail echoed down the corridors and bounced off tile like it was hunting people. Kane moved before anyone finished reacting. He didn't look at Mallory. He didn't argue with the deputies. He went straight for the hallway that led to patient property, because if the bag was gone, someone had already decided what mattered most. He cut past a nurse cart, dodged a tech pushing a wheelchair, and shoved through a door marked property/security access. A short corridor, a keypad on a second door, a camera bubble in the corner. The keypad's light was still blinking like it had just been used. Kane swiped the admin badge again. Green. The lock clicked. He opened the door and immediately understood why the alarm had started screaming. One of the metal property bins was open. A drawer hung halfway out like it had been yanked too hard. Plastic bags with patient labels were scattered on the floor, torn open in a hurry. A clerk stood behind the counter with both hands up, frozen, eyes huge. She wasn't screaming. She was past that. He said he was authorized, she stammered. He had a wristband printer and a badge, and he said the sheriff was taking over. Kane's eyes scanned the mess. A purse, he said, brown leather, spill in the bottom, receipt sticking out. The clerk swallowed and nodded toward an empty slot. It was there. I put it there myself. Kane's jaw tightened. Which way did he go? Back exit, she whispered. Loading dock. He said he had to secure evidence. Kane leaned over the counter and looked at the camera monitor. The screen showed 4 angles: corridor, door, loading dock, and the exterior service lane behind the hospital. But one of the feeds was black. The loading dock camera. Kane stared at it. That feed go out often? The clerk shook her head fast. No, it just went black when he came in. Someone wasn't just stealing a purse. Someone was controlling the building. Kane turned, already moving. Lock this room, he told her. If anyone comes in claiming orders, you call security and you say you want the badge number and the name. If they won't give it, you scream. She nodded like she'd do anything he said. Kane hit the corridor again and ran for the service stairwell because the elevators were too slow and too public. Down 1 flight, 2. The smell changed, less antiseptic, more diesel and hot concrete. He pushed out into the loading area and the air hit him like a slap. Sunlight, heat shimmer. The sound of the city was muted behind the hospital's back wall. A dock worker stood near stacked pallets, staring toward the service lane with a confused expression. You guys filming something? He asked, like that was the only explanation that made sense. Kane didn't answer. He jogged to the edge of the dock and looked down the service lane. 3 sheriff SUVs were parked there, angled like a block. One of them had its rear door open. Deputy Mallory stood at the nearest SUV, talking to someone inside like he was giving instructions. His mirrored sunglasses caught the light and threw it back cold, and next to him, close enough to be protected, was the man in scrubs. Not cuffed, not held, standing like he belonged. Kane's blood went still. Mallory lifted a hand and a deputy in the back seat passed something forward. A brown purse. Kane didn't breathe for a second. That was it. Mallory took the purse, glanced down the lane, and started toward the scrubs man like it was just paperwork. Kane broke into a sprint down the ramp. Hey! He shouted, voice cracking off the concrete walls. Mallory turned his head slowly, like he had all the time in the world. The scrubs man's eyes snapped to Kane. And there it was again, that calculation. Mallory didn't run. He didn't flinch. He waited until Kane was close enough that the deputies could justify whatever happened next. Stop right there, Mallory called out, voice carrying. You're trespassing and interfering with an investigation. Kane kept moving, slowing only enough to keep it from becoming a tackle. Investigation, Kane said, breath tight. You're handing evidence to a suspect. Mallory smiled, small. The only suspect I see is you. Kane's gaze cut to the purse in Mallory's hand. Open it, Kane said, in front of me, in front of your deputies. Mallory's expression didn't change. No. The scrubsman shifted one step closer to the SUV, like he was already preparing to disappear into it. Kane's eyes flicked past them down the service lane. And then he heard it. Engines, not the hospital's delivery trucks, Harleys. They came in low and fast, a thunder line rolling around the corner of the service lane entrance like they'd been waiting for a signal. 6 bikes first, then 12, then more. They didn't swarm, they didn't scatter. They formed a box, front and rear, left and right. They stopped at angles that made the lane unusable without touching a single sheriff vehicle. No fists, no weapons. Just steel and discipline and the kind of presence that made men reconsider their plans. The president rolled in last, slow, controlled, and parked his bike in the exact center of Mallory's route like a door closing. Mallory's jaw tightened. His deputies looked around, suddenly aware of how small the lane was and how many bikes could fit into it. The president took his helmet off and set it on the seat like he wasn't going anywhere. "That purse stays," he said. Mallory's hand hovered near his belt. "You think this intimidation works on law enforcement?" "It's not intimidation," the president said. "It's containment." Mallory's smile flickered. "You're obstructing," Kane cut in, voice low. "Chain of custody," he said, staring at the purse. "You want to take evidence? Fine. But you don't pass it to a guy a kid just identified as the one who poisoned his mother." The scrubsman snapped too fast. "He's lying." "Shut up," Kane said, and the words came out like a slap. Mallory turned toward Kane with a thin, controlled rage. "You're done," he said. "You're all done. Deputies—" The president didn't move. "Call it in," he said calmly. "Tell dispatch you have a medical poisoning case, attempted child injection, missing property, and you're trying to leave with the evidence without logging it." Mallory hesitated, just a fraction, because dispatch lines were recorded, because recorded lines meant the wrong people might hear. Kane saw his opening and stepped closer, hands open, no sudden movements. "Let me see inside," he said. "If there's nothing there, you walk away with it logged and sealed." Mallory's sunglasses hid his eyes, but Kane could still feel him calculating risk. Then the scrubsman moved his mouth near Mallory's shoulder and said something too quiet to hear. Mallory's grip on the purse tightened. That told Kane everything. The purse wasn't just evidence, it was leverage. Kane nodded once, as if he'd agreed with something that hadn't been spoken. Then he looked past Mallory to the deputy in the driver's seat of the SUV, the younger one, the one who'd hesitated inside the hospital when he saw the syringe. The kid deputy's eyes were darting between patches and badges, like his brain was trying to find the right rulebook. Kane held his gaze. "You saw the needle," Kane said, plain. "You saw it hit the tile. If you let him leave with that purse and that woman dies, you're part of it." The deputy swallowed. His throat bobbed like he wanted to speak. Mallory snapped, "Eyes forward." The deputy didn't look away. Kane took one more step. "Open it," he repeated, softer now. "You can do the right thing in 1 second." Mallory's voice went sharp. "Back up." The bikes didn't move. The president didn't blink. Mallory's deputies shifted their weight, hands hovering where training told them to go. And then the scrubsman made another mistake. He reached for the purse, not to protect it, to take it and run. Kane moved first. He didn't swing, he didn't punch. He simply grabbed the strap the moment the scrubsman's fingers touched it and yanked it back hard. The purse snapped out of Mallory's hand. Mallory lunged. 2 bikes rolled forward half a tire length, just enough to block his path without contact. The motion was so small it almost looked polite. Mallory stopped. Kane stepped back with the purse and ripped it open. Inside, a wallet, keys, a lipstick, a small cloth bag, a folded paper with shaky handwriting, and, wedged under the lining like it had been hidden in a rush, something rectangular wrapped in a plastic sleeve. Kane pulled it out, a flash drive, black, no label. Kane's pulse hammered. The scrubsman's face changed completely. The performance dropped. There was only a hard, furious hunger left. Mallory's voice turned low. "Put that back." Kane looked at him. "You just proved she wasn't having a heat stroke," he said. "You proved she was carrying something you needed." Mallory stepped forward again, the lane tightening with him. "Hand it over." The president's voice didn't rise. "No." Mallory's face twitched. "This is your last warning." Kane didn't answer him. He flipped the folded paper open. It wasn't a note to family, it was a list. names, times, room numbers, and one line circled twice in trembling ink. Farm delivery, Service Bay, Thur 310. Kane's eyes snapped up. Today's date was Thursday. He looked at the loading bay clock mounted over the dock door. 3:07. The scrubs man inhaled sharply, like he'd been punched. Kane felt cold slide under his skin. "They're coming," he said. Mallory's expression shifted. Tiny, but enough. Not confusion, anticipation. He was here for a reason. The SUVs weren't response. They were pickup. Kane closed his fist around the flash drive and the note and stepped back. "President," he said, "they've got a delivery coming through this bay." The president's gaze went to the dock doors, then to the service lane entrance. He lifted two fingers and pointed. Silent orders. Bikes repositioned immediately. One rolled to the service lane mouth, another moved up to the dock. Two more peeled off toward the hospital's side road, cutting off the exit routes without anyone needing to shout. Mallory watched it happen, and for the first time, he looked unsettled. "You can't do this," he hissed. "You don't know who you're stepping on." Kane leaned in, close enough that Mallory couldn't pretend he was a hero. "You poisoned a mother," Kane said. "You tried to take a kid. I don't care who you answer to." Mallory's jaw clenched. "You think this ends here?" Kane looked past him at the dock doors, because right then, from inside the loading bay, came the deep mechanical rumble of a truck backing in. Slow, heavy, deliberate. And Kane realized the worst part. They weren't trying to escape anymore. They were trying to finish the exchange with the flash drive still in the building. The dock door shuddered as the truck backed in, slow and heavy, tires crunching gravel like it had all the rights in the world. The sound filled the service lane. Diesel, air brakes, that deep mechanical confidence of something that expects everyone else to step aside. Mallory's deputies tensed, hands hovering near their belts like they were waiting for permission to turn this into a use of force story. The scrubs man stood half a step behind Mallory's shoulder, eyes locked on Kane's fist where the flash drive was hidden. Kane didn't look at either of them. He looked at the truck. Because this wasn't an accident. The timing wasn't luck. The list in his hand had been a schedule, and the hospital had been operating like a stage. The dock door lifted. A slab of light rose, and the rear of a white box truck appeared, spotless, unmarked except for a generic barcode sticker that could have belonged to anything. The driver hopped down. Mid-30s, ball cap, sunglasses, calm posture. He glanced at the sheriff SUVs first, then at the wall of bikes, and Kane saw the smallest hesitation, like this wasn't the exact picture he'd been promised. The driver lifted a clipboard. "Farm drop," he called out. "Where do you want it?" Mallory stepped forward instantly. "Bring it inside. Receiving." The president didn't move, didn't shout. He just angled his bike half a tire width so the driver's direct path was blocked. "Keys out," the president said. The driver blinked. "Excuse me?" "Keys out," the president repeated, same tone. Not aggressive, final. Mallory's voice sharpened. "He doesn't answer to you." Kane stepped in, holding the folded list up. "Thursday, 3:10, Service Bay," he said, speaking to the driver now. "You're on a schedule that was hidden in a poisoned woman's purse." The driver's mouth tightened. "I just deliver." Kane's eyes stayed steady. "Then you don't mind a look at the manifest?" The driver hesitated, then tried to laugh it off. "Company policy?" The president lifted two fingers. Two riders peeled off the line, rolled up behind the truck, and parked inches from its bumper. Another pair moved to the service lane mouth, sealing it. Nobody touched the driver. Nobody raised a weapon. They didn't need to. The driver's laugh died. His hand went to his pocket slowly and came back with the keys. He set them on the edge of the dock like a peace offering. Mallory's face went hard. "This is an active investigation. You're obstructing lawful operations." Kane didn't take his eyes off the driver. "Open the back." The driver swallowed. "I'm not authorized." Kane leaned in, voice low enough that only the driver could hear. "That mother is fighting to breathe. A kid is fighting not to get taken. If you're clean, you walk away after we look. If you're not, you can decide right now whether you want to be the guy who helped poison her." The driver's jaw flexed. He stared at Kane, then at the bikes, then at Mallory, like he was searching for the safest lie. Finally, he turned and pulled the latch. The rear door rolled up. Inside were stacked totes and sealed cartons, medical packaging, cold packs, shrink wrap. It looked boring, legit, exactly how a real operation would hide behind routine. Doc's voice crackled in Kane's earpiece. "Where are you?" Kane keyed the mic once. "Doc, delivery is here." Doc's reply came fast. "She's stabilizing, barely. Tox is slow. If you have anything with labels, anything with lot numbers, I need it. Now." Kane's gaze dropped to the nearest tote. A printed label, smudged like someone had wiped it. Not a hospital label, a third-party supplier. Kane stepped up and hooked a finger under the tote lid. The driver flinched. "Don't, that's sealed." Kane popped it open. Inside were smaller boxes, and inside those rows of vials and foam cutouts. Clear liquid, identical to the unlabeled vial Kane had grabbed earlier, except these had tiny printed tags. Not medication names, codes. Kane's eyes flicked to the scrubsman. The scrubsman's expression didn't even try to pretend anymore. He stared at the vials like a starving man watching food. Mallory stepped forward. "Close that." The president rolled his shoulders slightly, blocking Mallory's path without moving his feet. "No." Mallory's hand dropped to his belt. "I said close it." Kane pulled one box free, held it up, and read a code aloud. It matched a code handwritten on the folded list. He looked at the driver. "You ever deliver these to the hospital pharmacy?" The driver's throat bobbed. "I drop it receiving, that's it." Kane nodded toward the scrubsman. "Any signs?" The driver's eyes flicked to the scrubsman for half a second. That half a second was enough. Kane turned to Mallory. "You're not here to investigate. You're here to escort." Mallory's face stayed locked. "You don't know what you're talking about." Then the scrubsman made his move. Not toward the truck, toward the hospital door. He slipped backward, quick, trying to disappear into the building while everyone's attention was on the cargo. Kane saw it and reacted instantly. "He's moving." One rider broke off to intercept, but the scrubsman was already through the dock access door. Kane didn't hesitate. He shoved the tote lid down, tossed the folded list to the president, and said one word. "Hold." Then he sprinted after the scrubsman into the dock corridor, the hospital swallowing sound and light behind him. His arm burned where the hooded man had punctured him earlier. The skin was tight, hot, swelling under leather. He ignored it. He hit the corridor at speed and immediately felt the building's mood shift. Code Pink had legs now. A security guard was jogging past, radio pressed to his ear. Two nurses were clustered by a doorway, whispering urgently. A staffer in a polo with a badge was locking a side door and checking the hallway like he was waiting for someone. Kane cut left toward reception. He didn't get there. A pair of security officers appeared at the end of the hall, moving fast with purpose, and between them, Noah. Noah's face was white with terror. His wrists were pinned lightly but firmly, not violent, just controlling. The bright wristband was still on him, and now there was a second one stacked above it, newly printed, tighter. Noah saw Kane and jerked like a leash snapped. "Kane!" one of the security officers barked. "Sir, you need to stay back." Kane slowed just enough not to look like an attacker. "Where are you taking him?" "Quiet room," the guard snapped. "He's been involved in a violent incident. Sheriff's office requested—" Kane's eyes sharpened. "Which sheriff?" The guard hesitated. "Deputy Mallory." Kane's jaw locked. "Mallory doesn't decide patient custody." The guard's face tightened. "He's a minor. Noah's voice broke. "They said my mom died." Kane's chest went cold. "Who said that?" Noah's eyes flicked toward the stairwell door behind the guards. "A nurse. She said it and then she smiled." Kane felt the room tilt. Doc had said she was barely stabilizing. If someone told Noah she was dead, it wasn't information, it was leverage. Kane stepped closer, hands still open, voice controlled. "Noah's mother is alive. She's in Trauma 1. You can confirm with Doc right now." The security officer's eyes darted. "I don't have time." Kane's earpiece crackled again, this time with a rider's voice from outside, tight and urgent. "President, we got movement. Mallory's deputy is trying to get the truck moving. Scrubs guy bolted inside. We're holding, but..." Kane didn't answer the earpiece. He stared at the security officer holding Noah. "Let him go." The officer's posture hardened. "Back up." Noah's breathing turned fast and shallow. "Kane, please." Kane took one more step, and that's when the nurse stepped out of the stairwell behind the guards, not in full scrubs, half-scrubbed top under a jacket, hair tucked, badge flipped backward so nobody could read it at a glance. Her face was too calm. She smiled at Noah again, small and reassuring, like she was offering candy instead of control. "Noah," she said softly, "come on. You're safe now." Noah recoiled, instinct screaming. "No." Kane moved, not at the guards, at her. He closed the distance in 2 strides, grabbed her wrist as she reached toward Noah, and felt a hard object under her sleeve. Plastic, rigid. A syringe sleeve. Kane twisted her arm up and away from Noah in one smooth motion, pinning her to the wall without slamming her head, without giving the guards a reason to claim he'd attacked staff. Her calm cracked. Her eyes went sharp and ugly. "Let go." Kane leaned in. "Wrong kid!" The security officers surged forward, yelling, radios squawking, and for a second, it almost became the mess the attackers wanted. Everyone shouting, everyone reacting, nobody thinking. Kane turned it into a clean picture. He peeled the syringe sleeve from her cuff and dropped it on the floor where the guards could see it. Plastic clicked against tile. Both security officers froze. The nurse tried to pull free, and Kane drove her shoulder into the wall harder, not enough to injure, enough to stop movement. The younger security officer stared at the sleeve, then at Noah, then at Kane. His voice dropped. "What the hell's that?" Kane didn't answer him. He looked at Noah. "Stay with the riders. Don't go anywhere with hospital staff. Not security. Nobody. Only the men in patches you recognize and Doc. Understood?" Noah nodded violently, tears rolling. Kane released the nurse just long enough to grab the back of her jacket and spin her toward the guards. "You want to be useful? Detain her, right now, and lock the stairwell behind her." The older security officer hesitated. The nurse seized that hesitation and did what trained people do when they're cornered. She screamed, not a fear scream, a performance scream. "He's attacking me! He's got the child!" Heads turned down the hall. Footsteps started. Radios exploded. Kane felt the trap closing and made the only move that kept Noah alive. He grabbed Noah by the wrist and pulled him away from the security officers before the crowd could form. Fast, decisive, not gentle. Noah stumbled, then ran with him. "Where?" Noah gasped. "Garage," Kane said. "We go where cameras are bad, but exits are fewer." They cut through a staff corridor and burst into the parking garage stairwell. Concrete heat hit them. Car alarms chirped in the distance. The garage was half full, shadows between pillars, engines starting as people tried to leave because of the chaos. Kane's arm throbbed. His vision tunneled at the edges for a half second, like his body was reminding him it had been punctured. He shook it off and pulled Noah down the ramp. "Noah," a voice called behind them. Not Kane's people. A man's voice, smooth, urgent, pretending to care. Kane glanced back. The scrubs man had found them. He was jogging, not sprinting, keeping his hands visible, wearing concern like a uniform. And behind him, 2 men in polos with badges were moving with him, flanking like security. "You don't have to run," the scrubs man called. "Your mother." Noah flinched and looked up at Kane, terror shaking his whole face. "Don't listen." Kane tightened his grip. "Don't look at him." They reached the lower level. A black sedan was waiting there, engine running, parked in a spot that wasn't random. Driver inside. Passenger door cracked open like a mouth. Kane's stomach dropped. The sedan wasn't here to leave. It was here to receive. The scrubs man's voice carried closer now. "Noah, stop! You're in danger with him." The 2 badgemen were spreading out, trying to angle Kane toward the sedan without it looking like hurting. Kane shoved Noah behind a concrete pillar. "Stay. Do not move." Noah shook his head. They won't get you," Kane said, and his voice had no space for doubt. Kane stepped out from the pillar and faced the sedan. The passenger door opened wider. A hand appeared, palm up, holding something small that glinted under the garage light. Another syringe. Kane's pulse slammed. He didn't give them time to close. He sprinted straight at the open door, grabbed the edge, and slammed it shut with all his weight. Metal cracked, glass rattled. The hand inside jerked back. Kane yanked the handle again and ripped the door open this time, pulling the passenger out by his collar before the man could brace. The passenger hit the concrete hard. The driver floored it, trying to peel away, but a bike engine roared somewhere above. One of Kane's riders had tracked the movement, and the sedan's escape path suddenly filled with a Harley, sliding into the lane like a barricade. Tires squealed. The sedan skidded, stopped short, trapped. Kane hauled the passenger up just enough to see his face. It wasn't the hooded man. It was someone tired and mean, the kind of guy who did errands for monsters. The guy spat blood and laughed. "You're too late." Kane slammed him into the pillar once, not for pain, for silence. "Where's the hood?" The man's eyes darted past Kane to Noah's hiding spot, and Kane felt his blood turn cold as he realized the passenger wasn't looking at Noah. He was looking at the space behind Noah. Kane turned his head and saw the hooded man stepping out from between two parked SUVs, already closing in on the pillar with a needle held low like a knife. Kane turned, and the hooded man was already at the pillar. Quiet steps, hood up, needle low, no hurry in him at all, like time belonged to him. Noah crouched behind the concrete, eyes huge, lips moving with no sound. The passenger Kane had dragged out of the sedan saw the hooded man and went gray. Not scared of Kane, scared of him. That told Kane everything. Kane shoved the passenger forward like a human door. "Move!" The hooded man didn't flinch. He slid around the stumbling body and jabbed the needle into the passenger's forearm without even looking. Quick, precise. The passenger dropped like somebody unplugged him. Noah made a strangled noise. Kane swung the open car door wide, using it as a shield, and drove it at the hooded man's chest. The hooded man caught the door edge with his left hand and absorbed the hit. His right hand stayed low, waiting for Kane to get greedy. Kane didn't. He stepped in tight, pinned the hooded man's left arm to the doorframe, and grabbed the needle wrist. Cold plastic, hard grip. He twisted. The hooded man headbutted him. Pain flashed. Blood filled Kane's mouth. He kept hold anyway and yanked the hooded man into the sedan roof. Metal rang. "Noah!" Kane shouted without looking. "Stairs! Go!" Noah hesitated. Kane roared raw enough to shake him loose. "Now!" Noah ran. The hooded man's eyes tracked him, and Kane felt the intent like heat. The hooded man tried to turn his wrist inward, trying to find Kane's ribs. Kane drove his knee into the man's thigh, then wrenched the wrist outward with both hands. Snap. The plastic barrel cracked. The metal tip popped loose and skittered across the concrete. The hooded man's face finally changed. Pure anger, immediate and sharp. Kane used it. He slammed the hooded man down over the fallen passenger and pinned him with a forearm across the throat. "Who sent you?" Kane hissed. The hooded man's breath rasped. "You're behind." "You got a name," Kane said. "The clean one. Scrubs. Say it." The hooded man's lips parted like he was about to spit that powder again. Kane smashed the heel of his hand into the man's mouth and held him down. "Try it." A bike engine screamed close. The rider who'd blocked the sedan slid in, hopped off, and pulled thick zip ties from his saddlebag like he kept them for days like this. Kane nodded. Hands. Feet. The rider worked fast. Wrists cinched, ankles cinched. Click, click. The hooded man lay still for 1 second, then smiled through blood. "Too loud," he whispered. Kane's phone vibrated in his vest. "Doc." Kane stepped back, eyes never leaving the hooded man. "Watch him," he told the rider. "If he twitches, you step on his headlight and you don't apologize," he answered. Doc's voice was tight and shaking with anger. "She woke up." Kane's throat locked. She's alive," Doc snapped. "Barely, and she's begging for Noah. She says they'll take him to a quiet room. She says that's not a quiet room. It's a handoff." Kane's eyes flicked to the stairwell Noah had run up. The garage suddenly felt too open, too many angles. "Who's they?" Kane demanded. Doc didn't hesitate. "She said a name. Halden." Kane's jaw clenched. Doc continued, faster. "She said she stole proof from Halden, a drive. She hid it in her purse lining. She said if he gets it back, people die. She said it's bigger than the hospital." Kane looked down at his fist. He still had the flash drive, sweat-warm plastic against his palm. "Doc," Kane said low, "I have it." A beat, then Doc exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "Good. Don't let it out of your sight. And Kane, your side. That puncture earlier. Are you okay?" Kane touched the shallow scratch where the needle had grazed him. It burned cold. "Didn't go deep. Needle broke." "Doesn't matter," Doc snapped. "If there was anything on that tip, you don't wait. You get to me when you can, or you'll drop when it's worst." Kane swallowed. "Understood." Another voice cut in near Doc, distant and official. "Doctor, Sheriff's Office is requesting custody." Doc's answer was venom. "Tell Mallory to choke." The line went dead. Kane shoved the phone away and crouched by the hooded man again. "Halden's your handler," Kane said. "Right?" The hooded man's eyes glittered. You think Halden matters. Then who? Kane asked. The hooded man's smile widened. Rook. Kane's stomach tightened. Rook who? The hooded man whispered, almost kind. Say it out loud and you won't live to regret it. Footsteps hit the stairwell above. Kane looked up. Noah came back down 3 steps, face twisted in panic, pulled by 2 security officers trying to keep it calm. Noah, one guard said, voice too gentle. We just need you to come with us. Noah saw Kane and tried to break away. The other guard caught his arm. No, Noah snapped, voice cracking. Stop! Kane surged forward, then forced himself to slow, hands visible. Let him go. The guards froze when they saw the hooded man zip-tied on the ground. One guard lifted his radio. Sir, step back. This is custody. Sheriff's request. No, Kane said. This is abduction. The guard's grip tightened. Kane watched the guard's eyes flick, right, toward the garage exit lane, like he was checking timing. Kane felt cold certainty settle in. Halden told you, Kane said quietly. The guard didn't answer. Kane took Noah's wrist, gentle but firm, and pulled him to his side. Noah pressed against Kane's hip, shaking hard. Tell me where the quiet room is, Kane said. Silence. Kane nodded once. Okay. He raised his mic. President, parking garage, 2 security. They've got their hands on the kid. Halden's pushing. Static. Then the president's voice. Immediate. Hold. We're coming. The guards tried to retreat up the stairs with Noah. They didn't get far. Harley engines rolled in from the far end of the garage, more than 1, more than 5, moving between pillars like a tide of shadow and chrome. They didn't swarm the guards. They cut the lanes. They sealed exits. The guards' confidence drained in real time. The first bike stopped beside Kane, and the rider stepped off. The president. He looked at Noah, then the tied-hooded man, then the guards, then Kane's face. This building's rotten, he said. Kane held up the flash drive. This is why. The president's gaze locked on it. Then nobody leaves with the kid. The guards' radios exploded. Doors clanged. The garage started filling with uniforms, answering the announcement. The hooded man on the ground smiled like he'd been waiting for this. He doesn't chase, he rasped. He summons. The president didn't look away from the stairwell. Move the kid. 2 riders stepped tight around Noah, turning him into the center of a moving wall. Noah's eyes clung to Kane. Kane squeezed his shoulder once. Between them, don't stop. A side door burst open and more security spilled in, radios up, faces already convinced. Then Deputy Mallory walked in with 2 deputies behind him, cuffs out like he was arriving for a headline. His mirrored glasses swept the scene and landed on Kane's fist. Step away from the child, Mallory said, and hand over what you took. Kane lifted the flash drive just enough for everyone to see. Evidence, he said. Poisoning, attempted injection, kidnapping. Mallory took a step forward and stopped as bikes rolled half a tire length, sealing the lane without touching him. Mallory's mouth tightened. You want to obstruct me in my own county? A calm set of footsteps came down the ramp behind the security line. Halden. Clean scrubs. Badge visible now like he'd stopped hiding. Clipboard in one hand, wristband printer in the other. He smiled at Noah like he was a favorite patient. Noah, Halden said softly. Come with me. Quiet room. You're safe. Noah recoiled. That's him, he whispered to Kane. That's the one. Halden's smile stayed in place, but his eyes slid to the flash drive. Give me the drive, he said, voice still gentle, and your mother gets the kind of care people like you can't buy. The threat sat under the kindness, clean and sharp. The president's voice went flat. Touch the kid and you don't leave this garage. Halden sighed, almost bored, and nodded once at Mallory. Mallory raised his cuffs. Take them, he ordered. Security started moving in from both sides. Kane's vision pinched at the edges again, cold sweat under his vest, and he understood Halden wasn't here to negotiate. He was here to own the last 10 seconds. Kane could feel the garage closing in, not physically. There was still space between pillars, lanes, parked cars, but the options were shrinking. Every radio crackle was another door shutting somewhere. Every uniform stepping in was another hand reaching for Noah. Mallory lifted his cuffs like a promise. Security moved in from both sides, trying to turn the bikes into the problem and the kid into procedure. Halden stood behind it all, clean and calm, eyes fixed on the flash drive like it was oxygen. "Last chance," Halden said softly. "Give it to me and we stop escalating." The president didn't raise his voice. "You already escalated when you poisoned a mother." Halden's smile didn't slip. "Allegedly." Kane's vision pinched at the edges again. His forearm throbbed where the needle had grazed him. Not pain, heat. A slow, wrong heat. He forced it down and kept his eyes on Halden's hands. Clipboard, wristband printer, nothing that looked like a weapon, because Halden didn't need one if he had people. Mallory nodded at his deputies. "Take him," he ordered, pointing at Kane. One deputy stepped forward, and Kane saw it in the man's posture. He didn't want to fight. He wanted a clean arrest, a neat story. "Biker obstructs law enforcement." Kane opened his hands. "I'm not running," he said, "but you don't touch the kid." Mallory's lips curled. "I'll touch whoever I want." The president angled slightly, blocking the lane with his body. "Wrong." Security surged another half step, and the garage filled with overlapping voices, orders, warnings, someone yelling about liability. Noah pressed into the rider's wall, shaking, eyes flicking between Halden and Kane like he was trying to decide which nightmare was real. Kane leaned toward the president without turning his head. "Move him," he murmured. The president didn't look at Kane. His gaze stayed on Halden. "Already moving." Kane didn't see it at first. Then he caught it. A rider 2 steps behind Noah shifted, opening a narrow gap between bodies. Noah was guided through it, tight and fast, like a football player being escorted through a collapsing line. No running, no screaming. Just a controlled slide toward the stairwell shadow. Halden's eyes tracked the movement instantly. His smile finally cracked. "Stop that child," Halden said, voice still gentle, but the gentleness had sharpened into command. 2 security officers broke formation and started toward the gap. Kane stepped into their path. "No." One of them shoved him. Not hard, but enough to test if Kane would react violently. Kane didn't swing. He just planted his boots and held his ground. The guard's radio squawked. "Sheriff says detain." Kane's hand snapped up and seized the radio mic on the guard's shoulder, yanking it close enough to speak into it. "Mallory," Kane said loud and clear. "If you want him, you come through me." Mallory's jaw tightened. "Hands off my people." Kane released the mic and backed off a fraction, giving the guard his space back. "Then get your people out of my kid's way." Noah was almost at the stairwell now. One rider vanished into the shadow with him, another following, another sealing behind. Halden's eyes narrowed. He tapped his wristband printer once like he was clicking a pen. A door at the far end of the garage opened, and 4 more men in polos with badges stepped out, moving in a line. Not hospital security. Too smooth, too coordinated. Private muscle with hospital access. Kane felt his stomach drop. "President," he said. The president's voice stayed calm. "I see them." The polo men fanned out, not to fight bikers, to cut off the stairwell. Halden didn't look at them. He didn't have to. He just said, "Bring him back." The polo men moved. Kane made the decision before his body finished the thought. He pulled the flash drive from his fist, held it up high, and raised his voice so every camera and every badge could hear. "You want this?" he shouted. "Come take it." Halden's eyes locked on the drive. Mallory's head snapped toward it like a magnet. The polo men hesitated for half a second, torn between the kid and the drive. That half second was everything. The president stepped closer to Kane, as if to calm him, as if to talk him down. Instead, his hand brushed Kane's wrist in a quick, practiced touch. Kane felt it, the drive leaving his grip without anyone seeing it happen. Kane kept his arm up anyway, fingers now empty. He turned that emptiness into confidence. Halden took a step forward, hungry. "Give it to me," he said, quieter now, as if lowering the volume would make it easier to obey. Kane smiled with his mouth only. "You first. Tell Mallory to let the kid go." Mallory's voice snapped. "You're not negotiating." "Sure I am," Kane said, "because I'm standing, and your whole county just watched you protect a man a kid identified as a poisoner." Mallory lunged forward, hand out, going for Kane's vest like he could just snatch the solution. The bikes moved half a tire length again, sealing the lane. No contact, no assault, just an iron suggestion. Mallory stopped short, furious. "Move your bikes!" The president's tone stayed flat. "You move your lies." Halden's eyes flicked, sharp, scanning. He knew the drive had shifted. He knew it wasn't in Kane's hand anymore. He was trying to spot where it went. Kane watched him read the room like a predator reading wind. Halden's gaze snapped toward the stairwell shadow where Noah had disappeared. Then Halden's face changed just slightly. He'd realized he'd been played. "Get him," Halden said, and this time the softness was gone. Mallory didn't hesitate. "Cuff him," he ordered. Two deputies stepped in hard, and Kane let them. He turned his body, offered his wrists, kept it clean. The cuffs snapped shut, cold metal biting leather-worn skin. Mallory yanked Kane forward by the chain between cuffs. "Thought you were tough," Mallory hissed. "Turns out you're just loud." Kane leaned in close enough that Mallory could smell the blood on his breath. "I'm not the loud one," Kane said. "You are. You brought sirens and badges for a robbery." Mallory's eyes flashed. He shoved Kane toward the sheriff SUV. Halden didn't follow. He watched the stairwell. He watched the rider's wall. He watched for Noah. The polo men moved again, fast now, pushing toward the stairwell entrance. The president stepped into their path. "Back," he said. One polo man reached inside his jacket, and Kane felt the garage tilt toward catastrophe. Not a gun, something smaller, a taser. The polo man brought it up, and before he could fire, the president's fist smashed into his wrist with a short, brutal motion that knocked the taser to the ground. A rider's boot pinned it instantly. Everything paused for half a second, like the whole garage held its breath. Then it broke. Security surged. Riders tightened. Deputies shouted. Someone yelled, "Get down!" And car alarms started chirping as bodies bumped vehicles. Kane, cuffed, shoved against the SUV, twisted his head to track the stairwell. He caught a glimpse of Noah, just a flash, being pulled upward by a rider, face turned back, eyes wide, mouth forming Kane's name. Kane nodded once, a promise he didn't have time to explain. Halden saw the same flash. His calm snapped into fury, and he pointed, shouting something to the polo men that got lost in the noise. Two of them broke and sprinted for the stairwell. The president moved like a gate closing. Riders slammed into position, blocking the stairwell door with bodies and bikes and shoulders, not punching, not stomping, just occupying space so completely that the polo men couldn't pass without going loud. Halden's voice cut through, now sharp and ugly. "You don't understand what you're holding." The president didn't look at him. "We understand exactly." Mallory shoved Kane into the back seat of the SUV, hard enough that Kane's shoulder hit the frame. The door slammed. For a second, Kane was trapped behind glass and metal, watching chaos through a narrow window. He saw Halden step back, pull out his phone, and make a call with a calm face again, like anger was something he could switch off when it stopped being useful. Mallory climbed into the front seat. "We're leaving," he barked at his driver. The driver hesitated. "They've got bikes. Drive!" Mallory snapped. The SUV lurched forward. A Harley rolled into its path and stopped, engine rumbling. Then another, then another. The exit lane became a wall of chrome and patches. Mallory leaned out his window and screamed, "Move!" The riders didn't move. The president walked into view at the SUV's hood, eyes on Mallory. "You don't get to take him and then go hunt the kid." Mallory's face twisted. "I can do whatever I want." The president's voice dropped. "No." Behind the president, Kane saw it. A rider slipping out of the garage shadow, moving fast, head down. Noah wasn't with him anymore. Noah was gone. Halden realized at the same moment. His head snapped, scanning the stairwell, the side doors, the garage ramps. He took one step forward, as if he could physically rewind time. Then Halden pointed straight at Kane's SUV and shouted, "Take him anyway! He knows where the drive is!" Kane's stomach tightened. Halden didn't care if Kane went to jail. Halden cared if Kane stayed alive long enough to tell the wrong people. Mallory turned his head slightly, looking back through the open partition at Kane. For the first time, Mallory's expression wasn't angry. It was empty. He reached down toward the center console. Kane's pulse slammed as he saw what Mallory's hand closed around. Not a gun, a small medical cooler. Mallory popped the lid with one hand, pulled something out, and Kane felt ice crawl up his spine. A syringe. Clear liquid. No label. Mallory didn't even try to hide it. He held it up like it was a joke only he understood. Kane pressed his cuffed hands together, wrists straining, and slammed them against the window once hard to get the president's attention. The The president's head turned. Kane mouthed one word through the glass. Needle. The president's eyes sharpened instantly. Mallory smiled and leaned back, syringe angled toward the partition as if he was about to reach in through the gap. Outside, Halden's phone call ended. He looked straight at the garage exit, then past it, toward the road. And Kane realized what Halden was doing. If Noah got out, Halden would chase. If the drive got out, Halden would chase harder, and the fastest place to choke a chase wasn't a garage, it was a highway. Mallory's hand lifted the syringe toward Kane's arm, and the president's fist smashed down onto the SUV's hood so hard the metal dented, the sound cracking like a gunshot as riders surged, the lane locked, the world tightened, and Mallory's door handle jerked as someone ripped it open from outside. The driver door flew open like it had been ripped off its routine. A rider yanked it wide, and Mallory's arm jerked back, syringe still in his fist, his face twisting in shock that anyone would touch him. The president leaned in, one hand clamped on Mallory's wrist so hard the deputy's knuckles whitened. "Put it down," he said. Mallory tried to jerk free. The syringe tip wobbled, hunting for skin. Kane smashed his cuffed hands up between them, metal clanging against the partition. The movement wasn't graceful, it was desperate. It knocked Mallory's forearm offline just enough that the needle scraped plastic instead of flesh. The president used that half-inch. He twisted Mallory's wrist outward, sharp and controlled, and the syringe popped free, bouncing on the seat. A second rider snatched it instantly and held it up like a trophy nobody wanted. Mallory's sunglasses didn't hide the panic anymore. "You just assaulted a deputy." "No," the president said. "You just tried to inject a man in custody." Mallory lunged for the syringe anyway, more instinct than logic. The president slammed him back into the seat, forearm across his chest, and Kane heard Mallory's breath punch out. The garage lane was jammed with bikes now, engines low, the air thick with heat and gasoline. Security and deputies were frozen in a messy half-circle, all of them seeing too much at once. A cuffed biker in the back seat, a sheriff deputy reaching for a needle, a hospital admin standing behind them with a calm face that didn't belong to the moment. Halden didn't shout. He didn't need to. He raised his phone and spoke into it, quiet, precise, and around the garage doors started opening. More uniforms, more security, more people arriving with partial information and full confidence. Kane leaned forward as far as the cuffs allowed and met the president's eyes. "Noah?" "Out," the president said. "Moving." Kane exhaled once, then felt it catch. His forearm burned like someone had poured ice water under the skin. He didn't say it, not yet. Mallory spat, furious. "You're all going down." The president didn't blink. "Maybe, but not today." He grabbed Kane's cuffs at the chain and yanked him toward the door. "Out now." Kane slid out of the SUV and hit the concrete with his boots, vision swaying for half a second. He steadied himself against the doorframe and forced his focus back onto the only thing that mattered. Keep Noah alive, keep the drive out of Halden's hands, keep Doc breathing room to work. Halden stepped forward a single pace, just enough to make it look like he was approaching to calm the situation. He wasn't looking at Kane anymore. He was looking at the lanes and exits, reading routes, planning the chase. "Everyone relax," Halden said, voice soothing, the exact tone a hospital uses when it wants people to stop thinking. "This is spiraling. Let law enforcement handle it." The president turned his head toward Halden like a slow gun. "You're not law enforcement." Halden's smile stayed. "I'm administration." "And you're the reason a mother almost died on a curb," Kane said, voice rough. Halden finally looked at Kane directly. His eyes were clean, bright, empty. "Almost," he said. The word landed like a slap. Kane felt heat surge behind his ribs. Mallory shoved out of the SUV, chest heaving, trying to reset the scene into something he controlled. He pointed at Kane's cuffs. "You're still under arrest. You move and it's escape. You touch anyone and it's assault. You breathe wrong and I'll write it as resisting." The president didn't move. "You can write whatever you want. Doesn't make it true." Mallory swung his gaze at the riders blocking the exit. "Move your bikes." Nobody moved. Then, from deeper in the garage, a sharp rev sounded. One bike, high and urgent, a signal. The president's head snapped toward it. Kane followed his gaze and saw a rider at the far ramp waving once, hard, not a greeting, a warning. Halden saw it too. His face tightened for the first time all day. A black SUV had entered the garage from the street-level entrance, engine quiet, windows tinted, moving like it didn't care who was watching. It didn't have sheriff markings. It didn't have hospital decals. It had a stance. 2 men inside, silhouettes only. They didn't slow when they saw the chaos. They kept rolling as if the chaos was part of the plan. Kane felt the garage air shift. This wasn't hospital security. This wasn't county deputies. This was whoever Halden called when he ran out of smiles. The hooded man, zip-tied near the sedan, lifted his head just enough to watch the black SUV glide past. His mouth curled. "Rook," he rasped like he was tasting the name. The president didn't ask questions. He lifted 2 fingers and pointed. The bikes didn't swarm the SUV. They didn't rush it like a mob. They did something worse. They made the lanes disappear. 2 Harleys rolled forward and angled across the path, forcing the SUV to brake. Another pair sealed behind it. A rider to the left slid into the escape lane. A rider to the right blocked the turn. In 5 seconds, the SUV was boxed. The driver tried the smallest nudge forward, testing. A bike moved half a tire width, and the SUV stopped. Halden's voice cut sharp. "Let them through." The president looked at him. "No." Mallory stepped toward the boxed SUV, trying to reclaim authority. "That's enough," he barked. "Everybody back." The SUV's rear window dropped 2 inches. Kane saw the dark circle of a phone lens or a camera aimed straight at his face like someone was collecting proof he existed. Then the window rose again. No words, just a look. Halden's jaw flexed. He wasn't surprised to see the SUV. He was relieved. Kane understood in a cold flash. Halden hadn't been trying to resolve anything. He'd been buying time until his real people arrived. The president's voice stayed calm. "We leave. Now," Mallory snapped. "You don't leave with a suspect." The president leaned in close enough that Mallory's deputies could hear every syllable. "Then arrest me too. Put cuffs on 300 men. Explain it to the cameras. Explain the needle. Explain the kid." Mallory's throat bobbed. His eyes flicked to Halden for instruction. Halden didn't give him any. Halden's attention was already on the exit, on the street, on the chase that was about to start. Because Noah was out. And Noah was moving. Kane felt a hand on his elbow. Doc's rider, one of the men who'd been in and out of Trauma 1, had slipped into the garage, face tight. "We got the kid," the rider said. "He's in a pickup, back road route, 2 bikes with him. He's crying, but he's moving." Kane's knees almost went soft with relief. He forced them to stay locked. "Doc?" "Still working on her. Sheriff tried to pull chain of custody. Doc told them to burn," the rider said. "But that won't last." Kane looked at the president. "Drive?" The president didn't answer out loud. He simply tapped 2 fingers against his vest once, and Kane understood. Not on him anymore. Already moved. Halden's eyes swept the riders again. His gaze landed on Kane's cuffs. He smiled, small. "You think you won," he said softly. Kane stared back. "We're still breathing." Halden's smile widened, and then he raised his voice just enough to carry. "He's leaving the county with a minor," he said, clearly, for the deputies, for the cameras. "If you let him go, that's on you." Mallory's shoulders tightened like a dog hearing its whistle. He stepped forward, trying to reach for Kane. The president moved first. He didn't punch. He simply stepped between them and turned his body into a wall, and behind that wall, riders began moving like a machine switching gears. Engines rose, bikes peeled out in pairs. The line at the garage mouth unspooled, not a stampede, a convoy. Kane was guided toward a bike at the edge, one with a passenger seat and a rider already waiting, helmet on, eyes scanning. "You're riding," the president said to Kane. "Cuffs stay. Keeps the story clean." Kane didn't argue. He swung onto the passenger seat, the rider's gloved hand steadying him. The world rocked for half a second as the poison heat in his arm tried to climb higher. He swallowed it down. The convoy rolled out of the garage and hit the street. Outside, the hospital had turned into a spectacle. People filming behind barricades, police cars stacked on curbs, more deputies arriving, sirens, shouting, and across the street the black SUV that had been boxed in the garage was now moving too, freed by the chaos, sliding into traffic behind them like a shadow. Halden had gotten what he wanted. A chase. The president's voice came through Kane's earpiece. "Highway, we end it there." Kane forced his head up. Too many eyes. Good, the president said. Let them watch. They hit the frontage road, then the on-ramp, and Kane realized the president wasn't improvising, because bikes were already there. Not 10, not 50, hundreds. They poured onto the ramp from side streets and overpasses like they'd been staged miles away. Same patches, same discipline, same quiet brutality of organization. The highway ahead was moving, cars flowing, oblivious, until the first wave of Harleys rolled into the lanes and began turning motion into stillness. A rider stopped sideways across lane 1, another mirrored him in lane 2. Others sealed the shoulder, others took the exits. Brake lights bloomed like a red tide, horns erupted. The highway started dying in real time. Kane stared at it, breath catching. How? The rider in front of Kane didn't turn his head. President called it, he said. 312 answered. Up ahead, the corridor opened again, clean, straight, controlled, an artery carved through a body of stalled metal. The convoy slid into it and accelerated, bikes front and rear, Kane in the middle, the president riding parallel like a moving wall. Behind them, the black SUV tried to follow into the corridor. It couldn't. Bikes closed like a door. The SUV swerved, trying to force its way past stopped cars. A rider rolled into its lane and stopped dead. Another sealed behind. Another blocked the shoulder. The SUV was pinned in a pocket of traffic with nowhere to go. Kane looked back over his shoulder and saw the driver's face through the windshield for the first time. Expressionless, eyes flat, phone up to his ear. Rook's people. Halden's call had reached them, and they'd arrived with a simple assignment. Stop the kid. Stop the drive. Stop Kane. The president's voice came through again, colder now. They're not alone. Kane's stomach tightened as he looked farther back through the sea of stalled cars. A second vehicle was pushing the wrong way up the shoulder, forcing gaps, climbing over the edgeline like it didn't care what it hit. Black pickup, bull bar, and on the dashboard, flashing lights, fake, cheap, trying to look official from a distance. The pickup was coming fast, ignoring the blockade, aiming straight for the corridor like it meant to ram its way in. Kane's rider leaned slightly, bracing. Kane's cuffs felt suddenly too tight. He watched the pickup close the distance, watched the bull bar align with the corridor opening, and he understood this wasn't a chase anymore. It was an attack. The black pickup came up the shoulder like it owned the white line. Fake lights flashed in its windshield, cheap blue strobes bouncing off stalled cars and turning confused drivers into an audience. The bull bar in front was scarred metal, built for impact. It wasn't trying to merge, it was lining up to hit the corridor. Kane felt the rider under him brace, subtle shift in hips, weight settling like a fighter planning feet. The corridor ahead stayed clean for the convoy, bikes holding it open like a zipper, but the pickup was closing fast from the right, using the shoulder as a runway. In Kane's earpiece, the president's voice stayed steady. Don't scatter, hold the line. A rider 2 positions ahead slid out toward the shoulder and stopped sideways, front tire pointed into the gravel like a gate swinging shut. The pickup didn't slow. It swerved toward the stopped bike, bull bar aiming for the frame. The rider didn't move. He stayed planted until the last possible second, then rolled half a bike length forward, just enough to force the pickup to choose between a direct hit and a hard angle into the stalled cars. The pickup chose violence anyway. It clipped the bike not full on, but hard enough to throw the rider sideways. Chrome sparked. The rider hit the asphalt and rolled, then stopped moving. Kane's stomach dropped. 2 bikers immediately broke formation, sliding in to shield the downed rider with their bikes, bodies angled to block tires from turning him into roadkill. Another rider sprinted on foot, dragging the man by the vest toward the median. The pickup kept pushing, now fully committed, trying to wedge into the corridor through sheer momentum. It didn't make it. A wall of Harleys tightened at the corridor mouth, bikes angled like teeth. A rider stopped dead in front of the bull bar with inches to spare, forcing the pickup to brake or climb someone. The pickup braked so hard the nose dipped. The driver still tried to nudge forward, grinding tires against gravel, searching for a gap that didn't exist. The president's voice snapped once. Box it! The riders didn't rush the pickup like a mob. They did something colder. They pinned it. One bike rolled to the driver's door and stopped. Another rolled to the passenger side. A third sealed behind. A fourth slid onto the shoulder in front, angled so the pickup couldn't surge forward without tearing its own bumper off. The pickup sat trapped in a pocket of stopped cars and chrome, engine growling like an animal in a cage. Kane twisted on the passenger seat, trying to see the driver through the windshield. The driver's hands were tight on the wheel. His head stayed forward, eyes scanning for a way out. He wasn't drunk. He wasn't panicked. He was working a plan. A rider walked up to the driver window with his hands visible and tapped the glass once, not hard, just enough to demand attention. The driver didn't roll it down. He lifted a phone instead, held it near his mouth, and spoke into it while staring straight ahead. Kane felt ice crawl up his back. This wasn't a driver taking orders. This was a driver reporting. The president's voice cut through the earpiece again. "Kane, you still with me?" Kane forced air into his lungs. "Yeah." "You're shaking." "It's the heat," Kane lied, tasting blood. Another voice broke in, one of the riders escorting Noah on the back route, breath tight and fast. "We got a problem. We're being pushed off the road." The president's tone didn't change. "Location: County Road 6, coming up under the West Bridge overpass, black van on our tail. They tried to PIT the pickup." Kane's heart kicked. "Noah's in that pickup." "Yeah," the rider said, voice strained. "Kid's in the back seat with my brother." "He's screaming!" The president's answer was immediate. "Bring them to the highway. We'll build you a corridor." "We're pinned," the rider shot back. "Van's got us boxed between traffic and the guardrail. They're trying to force a stop under the overpass." Kane heard the kid in the background, Noah's voice, distant but unmistakable, crying out something that turned into static. Kane's vision narrowed, edges dimming. His rider squeezed his knee once, a silent anchor. "Stay up," the rider muttered. The president's voice came again, sharper now. "All units, West Bridge overpass, second corridor, now." On the highway, bikes moved like they'd rehearsed it. The main corridor held the convoy's position, but a new pattern began forming a quarter-mile back. Riders sliding across lanes, stopping traffic in clean lines, opening a second artery that aimed straight for the underpass exit. Drivers leaned out of windows, shouting, filming, pleading. None of it mattered. The highway was no longer traffic. It was a controlled environment. Kane watched the boxed black pickup again. One rider was kneeling beside the downed man, checking him, talking into a radio. Another rider held a helmet against the man's head, steadying him. Kane wanted to get off the bike and run to him. He wanted to do something, but he couldn't leave the center. He felt the poison heat in his arm climb higher, creeping toward his shoulder in a slow burn that didn't match the sun. Kane swallowed hard and kept his head up. Far back near the shoulder, a shape moved between cars, too smooth, too deliberate. A man in a ball cap walked through the stopped lanes like a regular driver checking the mess. Except he wasn't looking at the crash. He was looking for Kane. The man stopped near a sedan, lifted his phone, and angled it. Kane realized he wasn't filming. He was scanning faces. A rider intercepted him instantly, stepping into his path with a calm hand out. "Back to your car." The man turned away, already moving, already disappearing into the crowd of vehicles. The president's voice dropped into Kane's ear, quieter. "They're everywhere." Kane breathed through his nose, slow. "Rook's people." The president didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "You ever hear the name before today?" Kane didn't take his eyes off the lanes. "Not like this." The president's voice went colder, something personal underneath it. "I have." Kane turned his head just enough to see the president riding parallel in the corridor, posture perfect, eyes scanning. "You gonna tell me why?" The president's jaw flexed once. "When this is over." The overpass was coming into view now, concrete ribs above the highway, shadows spilling across the lanes. Under it, the second corridor was forming like a throat opening. And then they appeared. A dented pickup shot out from the underpass exit, tires chirping as it hit the edge of the highway shoulder. Two Harleys flanked it like outriders. The pickup's back window was cracked, and Kane saw a small face in the rear seat, Noah, pressed against the glass, mouth open in a scream that the highway noise swallowed. Behind the pickup, a black van burst out of the shadow, too fast, too close, trying to climb into the corridor behind them. The riders didn't let it. Two bikes dropped into the van's path and stopped dead, forcing it to brake. The van swerved toward the shoulder. A third bike slid in and sealed it. The van slammed into the brakes so hard its front end dipped and bounced, and for a second it looked like it might ram anyway. It didn't. Instead, the passenger door popped open while it was still rolling. A man leaned out with his arm extended. Not a gun. A small injector pistol, compact, quiet, designed to look like nothing from far away. Kane's blood turned to ice. The man aimed at the pickup carrying Noah. The president saw it at the same time. Down! A rider threw his bike sideways in a controlled slide, metal scraping asphalt, and the sliding mass took the shot meant for the pickup. Something snapped against the bike's fairing and disappeared. The rider rolled, came up, and kept moving, limping. The pickup surged into the second corridor and then merged toward the main corridor where Kane was. Two riders tightened around it instantly, turning it into the center of a moving shield. Noah's face appeared in Kane's peripheral, tear-streaked, terrified, alive. Kane tried to shout his name, but his throat locked. The president's voice came hard. "Bring the kid to me." The pickup slowed, edging toward the president's position. That's when the boxed black pickup, the one with fake lights, made its real move. The driver threw it into reverse, not to escape forward, to create space. The truck lurched backward into the stalled lane behind it, forcing a car to honk and brake, opening a diagonal gap along the shoulder. Then, the pickup gunned it forward, hard, bull bar angled toward the second corridor where Noah's pickup was sliding in. It wasn't trying to hit Kane anymore. It was trying to hit Noah. Kane's world narrowed to one point, the bull bar lining up with the kid's truck. His body moved before his brain finished the calculation. He shoved himself off the passenger seat. The cuffs bit into his wrists as he jumped, chain clanking. His boots hit asphalt and his knees buckled for half a second, but he ran anyway, straight toward the gap between the bull bar and Noah's pickup. Riders shouted, tires squealed, someone slammed a hand on a horn and held it until it became a continuous scream. Kane saw the driver's face now, eyes flat, jaw clenched, both hands locked on the wheel like he was steering into a wall by choice. Kane sprinted and threw himself against the side of Noah's pickup, shoving it sideways with all his weight, while a rider simultaneously yanked the steering wheel from the driver's seat. The pickup carrying Noah jolted left, tires hopping the edgeline into the corridor's safer center. The black bull bar missed the kid's door by inches and caught Kane instead. Metal slammed into Kane's hip and thigh like a sledgehammer. He went airborne, spinning, vision exploding white. He hit the asphalt and skidded, leather grinding, pain detonating through his leg. For a second, sound dropped out completely. Then it came back in a rush. Engines shouting, Noah screaming Kane's name from inside the pickup, riders cursing, the president's voice barking orders like a metronome. Kane tried to push up. His leg didn't answer. His hands shook. The cuffs felt suddenly absurd. A shadow fell over him. The president knelt, one hand on Kane's shoulder, eyes scanning the lanes. "Stay with me." Kane tried to speak. It came out as breath. "Noah." The president snapped his chin toward the kid's pickup now tucked inside the corridor, two riders shielding it. "Alive." Kane blinked hard, trying to keep the world in focus. "Good." The president's hand slid under Kane's vest and pulled something free, Kane's phone. He shoved it into Kane's cuffed hands. "Call Doc, tell him you're hit." Kane fumbled it, fingers numb. He hit the call. It rang once. Doc picked up instantly. "Where are you?" "Highway," Kane rasped. "I got clipped, leg, and..." He swallowed, vision warping. "They went for Noah." Doc's voice went sharp with fear and anger. "Stay awake. Don't let your blood pressure drop. If you feel cold, tell me." Kane laughed once, ugly. "I'm cold." Doc's tone changed, professional, urgent. "President, listen to me. If Kane took impact and he's already been exposed earlier, he can crash fast. You need to get him stable." The president leaned closer to the phone. "We're not leaving the corridor." Doc's voice turned hard. "Then end it." "End it now?" Kane's head rolled slightly and he saw Halden's black van pinned 3 lanes over, bikes sealing it, the injector man dragged out and pinned face down by 2 riders. The fake light pickup was now boxed too, driver pulled out, yelling. But Kane knew it didn't matter, because Halden wasn't on the highway. Rook was. The president's gaze locked on a black SUV further back in the stalled lanes, half hidden between a semi and a minivan. It wasn't moving. It wasn't trying to push. It was waiting. The rear window lowered an inch, the same silent gesture as before. A phone lifted, a camera lens aimed, and Kane heard the president speak a name like it tasted bad. "Rook," The phone in Kane's hands vibrated with an incoming call on the second line. Unknown number. Kane answered because he had no choice. "Yeah," a voice came through, calm and close like it was sitting in the seat beside him. "You just bought the kid 5 more minutes," it said. Kane's throat tightened. "Who is this?" A small pause, a smile in the silence. "You already know." Kane tried to sit up and couldn't. The president's hand pressed him down gently but firmly. The voice continued, unhurried. "Here's what happens next. You hand over the drive, and the boy keeps his mother." Kane's vision blurred. He forced it clear. "You don't have her." Another smile. "No, but I have what you need more." Kane heard a sound on the line, small, choked, terrified. A child trying not to cry. Noah. Kane's blood went to ice as the voice said, softly, almost kindly, "Look at the rear view of the pickup." Kane's head felt too heavy for his neck. The highway noise came in waves, engines, horns, distant shouting, then dipped out again like someone was turning a dial. "Look at the rear view of the pickup," the voice said. Kane forced his eyes toward Noah's truck. The pickup sat inside the corridor, 2 bikes tight on either side like steel ribs. The driver, one of the riders, had both hands on the wheel, knuckles white, face turned half back in fear. And in the rearview mirror, reflected between the front seats, Kane saw it. A man in the back seat. Not one of their riders. No patch, no helmet, dark cap pulled low, one arm wrapped around Noah's chest from behind like a seatbelt. The other hand held a compact injector pressed against the soft spot under Noah's jaw. Noah was frozen, tears streaking down his face, trying not to breathe too hard because every breath moved the needle. Kane's blood turned to ice so fast it felt like it cracked. The voice on the phone stayed calm, intimate. "You see him?" Kane swallowed. "Rook." A small pause like approval. "Good. You learn fast." Kane's cuffed hands shook against his lap. His legs screamed when he tried to shift, and his body reminded him, again, how close he was to going down hard. The president crouched beside Kane, eyes tracking the pickup, then the stalled lanes, then the black SUV half hidden behind a semi. The SUV's rear window was still cracked. A phone was still held up like an eye. The president spoke without looking at Kane. "Put it on speaker." Kane did. The tinny voice filled the space between engines. "You've got a boy in a truck," Rook said. "You've got a drive. You've got a corridor you think you control. Here's what you don't have. Time." The president's voice was flat. "Let him go," Rook chuckled once. "I will, when the drive is in my hand." Kane rasped, forcing air. "You don't even know what's on it." "I don't need to," Rook said. "Halden needs it. Mallory needs it. And if they need it, I get paid to return it." Kane heard Noah's breath hitch through the phone. Then a soft, broken sound, Noah trying not to cry out. Kane's chest clenched so hard he thought it might split his ribs. The president leaned closer to the pickup, eyes narrowed at the man holding Noah. "That man in the back seat," he said. "He's not getting out of here." Rook's tone didn't change. "He doesn't have to. He just has to press." Kane watched the injector tip shift a millimeter as the man tightened his grip. Noah flinched, and the bikes around the pickup rolled half a tire length inward like they could physically squeeze the danger out of the cab. The president's jaw flexed once. "Where do you want the handoff?" Rook answered immediately. "Open the corridor behind the pickup. Let my SUV roll up. You place the drive on the asphalt, step back, the boy walks." Kane's eyes flicked to the president. He could see the calculation behind the calm. Every option, every angle, every way this could turn into a dead kid. Kane forced his voice out. "Don't." The president didn't look at him. "We don't trade kids for pride." Kane's vision blurred at the edges. He tasted metal. He couldn't tell if it was blood or his own fear. The president raised his mic. "All units," he said, low and controlled. "Hold positions. No sudden moves. Nobody fires. Nobody rushes. We keep the kid breathing." The corridor behind Noah's pickup opened by inches, bikes sliding, engines idling, making a narrow lane. The black SUV rolled forward out of the stalled lanes, slow, confident, like it believed the highway belonged to it. It slid into the lane with its windows up, paint clean, no plates Kane could see. It stopped 20 yards behind the pickup. Rook's voice came through the phone again, amused. "See how easy it gets when you're reasonable?" The president stood, hands visible, posture relaxed like he was stepping into a conversation instead of a battlefield. A rider approached him from the corridor edge and placed something into the president's palm. A flash drive. Kane's stomach dropped. The president met Kane's eyes for the first time in minutes. His gaze was steady, unblinking, and Kane understood. Not the real one, a decoy. Walk toward the open space between the SUV and the pickup, boots slow on asphalt. The SUV's rear window lowered a few inches. A man's voice, Rook's real voice now, not distorted, carried out, calm and close. Put it down. The president crouched and placed the decoy on the road like it weighed nothing, then stood and took 3 steps back. In the pickup, the man behind Noah spoke into Noah's ear, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Noah's eyes squeezed shut. He shook his head, tiny, terrified. Kane's hands clenched in the cuffs until the metal bit. The SUV's driver door opened. A man stepped out. Not Halden, not Mallory. Older, lean, expensive shoes that didn't belong on asphalt. No rush in him at all. His eyes swept the corridor, the bikes, the stalled traffic, then landed on Noah's pickup like Noah was a package. Rook. Kane felt something ugly and deep in his chest, like recognizing a predator by the way the air changed around him. Rook walked to the drive on the asphalt and bent to pick it up. He didn't even check it. He just held it between 2 fingers, like a cigarette. Boy walks, Rook said. The man in the back seat of the pickup tightened his arm around Noah. Noah's lips trembled. He mouthed Kane's name without sound. The injector stayed pressed to Noah's neck. The president didn't move. Now, Rook sighed, almost annoyed, and lifted his phone. Do it. In the pickup, the man behind Noah shifted as if to open his door, and in that microsecond, the president did something Kane didn't expect. He stepped forward, 1 pace, eyes locked on Rook. Before you go, the president said, tell Halden he's finished. Rook's gaze flicked up, irritated. I don't take messages from bikers. The president's face didn't change. You used to. The words hit Rook like a slap. His eyes sharpened, recognition flickering. Kane's throat tightened. That was the connection the president hadn't said out loud. Rook's mouth curled. So that's who you are, the president nodded once. That's who I was. Rook's smile grew, thin and ugly. Then you know how this ends. You give me what I need. And you live with it. The president's voice dropped. No, you live with it. Rook's eyes narrowed. What did you do? The answer came from above, not from the corridor. A helicopter thumped over the highway, low and loud, wind chopping the heat shimmer into chaos. Every head turned, phones lifted higher. The sound of rotors swallowed horns and engines like the sky had taken control. A spotlight hit the corridor. Then a voice boomed from a loudspeaker, authoritative, amplified, impossible to ignore, ordering everyone to freeze, to stand down, to keep hands visible. Troopers appeared at the far end of the blockade, moving in a line with rifles shouldered but muzzles down, using cars and guardrails as cover, shouting commands that landed with real authority. And behind them, dark jackets with big letters, Federal, moved with purpose toward the center of the corridor. Rook's face shifted for the first time. Not fear. Calculation turning to damage control. He looked at the drive in his hand like it had betrayed him. The president didn't look away. It's already copied, he said. Already delivered. Already in the wrong hands for you. Rook's jaw tightened. Liar. The president nodded once toward a rider at the corridor edge. The rider held up a phone for 1 second, screen glowing with a file transfer confirmation and a name Kane didn't recognize. Then tucked it away. Rook's calm cracked. In Noah's pickup, the man with the injector pressed harder, panic slipping into his grip. Noah whimpered, high and thin. Kane's body tried to move even though it couldn't. He dragged one knee under him and immediately saw stars. The president's hand shot back, a silent command to stay down. Rook lifted his chin toward the pickup. Press, he said, cold now. The injector man's thumb moved, and the rider in the pickup's driver's seat did the only clean thing left. He slammed the truck into park, whipped his elbow back like a hammer, and drove it into the injector man's ribs, hard, twice, just enough to loosen the hold. Noah twisted free a few inches. A biker on the passenger side yanked the door open and reached in, grabbing Noah under the arms, dragging him out like pulling someone from a fire. The injector man lunged after him. A trooper's shout cracked through the air. "Don't move!" The injector man moved anyway. A rider hit him low, shoulder into hips, dumping him onto the asphalt. Two more pinned his arms. The injector skittered and was kicked away. Noah stumbled, then ran, straight into the president's arms. The president caught him and held him for half a second, tight and real, then handed him to the riders behind him like passing something fragile down a line. Noah's eyes found Kane. He broke free of the hands guiding him and sprinted toward Kane, face wrecked with relief and terror. He dropped to his knees beside Kane and grabbed Kane's cuffed hands carefully, like Kane might shatter. Noah couldn't get words out. He just held on. Kane swallowed hard. "You're okay," he rasped. "You're okay." Noah shook his head violently. They were in the truck. He was behind me the whole time. I didn't see him. "You're okay," Kane repeated, because it was the only truth that mattered. Rook stood still for 1 second too long. He looked at the helicopter, the troopers, the federal agents closing in, and then he made a choice. He turned to get back into his SUV. Two riders rolled their bikes half a tire length into his path. Rook stopped, eyes cold. "Move," he said. The president stepped closer, hands visible. "It's done." Rook's mouth curled. "Nothing's done." A federal agent, short hair, hard posture, raised a hand. "Rook," she shouted, "hands where I can see them." Rook didn't look at her. He looked at the president. "You think you saved a boy," he said softly. "You just showed me where to press next time." The president didn't blink. "Next time won't be in a hospital." Rook's eyes flicked to Kane on the ground, to Noah kneeling beside him, to the cuffs still on Kane's wrists, like the county had tried to write its own ending. Then Rook did something almost casual. He tossed the decoy drive onto the asphalt like garbage. It hit the road and bounced. A federal agent moved in fast. Another agent grabbed Rook's arm. Rook resisted, just enough to make it ugly, then stopped as if he'd decided the optics mattered more than the fight. Mallory's SUV was pinned farther up the corridor, deputies forced out, hands up, faces pale. Halden was on the shoulder near the troopers, still in scrubs, still trying to talk his way into control, until an agent snapped cuffs on him, and Halden's calm finally broke into something like panic. Doc's voice crackled in Kane's earpiece, frantic. "Kane, talk to me!" Kane forced his mouth to work. "Kid's safe," he breathed. Doc's exhale sounded like it hurt. "Good. Now you. Stay awake." Kane tried. The highway tilted. The sky looked too bright. The poison heat in his arm felt like it had climbed into his chest. Noah clutched Kane's cuffed hands tighter. "Don't die," he whispered, broken. Kane blinked slowly and focused on Noah's face, on the fact that Noah was here, and breathing and not in the backseat of a truck with a needle at his throat. "I'm not," Kane lied, because Noah needed it. The president crouched beside them, eyes scanning everything even now. He reached into his vest and pulled a small tool, then leaned to Mallory's deputy. Young, shaken, staring at the needles and the agents and the helicopter, like his world had split open. "Key," the president said. The young deputy hesitated, then fumbled his keyring forward with trembling fingers. The president unlocked Kane's cuffs. The metal fell away. Kane's hands dropped, suddenly too heavy, and Noah grabbed them anyway, holding on like it was the only anchor left. Sirens approached, real ambulances this time, cutting through the dead highway with the corridor already built for them. The president stood and looked down the line of stopped cars where thousands of people had watched the whole thing through windshields and phone screens. He didn't wave. He didn't posture. He just turned back to Kane, to Noah, to the mess they'd survived. "Doc gets him," the president said, voice low. "Then we finish the rest." Kane tried to nod and felt the world smear. Noah's voice was the last clear thing he heard. "Tell my mom. Tell her I didn't leave." Kane managed a breath that almost became a laugh. "She's going to tell you herself." Then the paramedics were there, hands on him, lights in his eyes, voices overlapping, a stretcher sliding under his broken leg, and Noah's small hand, still gripping his fingers, until someone gently peeled it away. As they lifted Kane, he caught one final glimpse down the corridor. Rook being walked toward a trooper line, head high, expression unreadable. Halden in cuffs, finally silent. Mallory shouting until an agent shut him down. And the president, standing alone in the middle of the highway he'd frozen, watching the arrests like he was watching a debt get paid.